Chapter 8. The Cost of Dishonesty. By a lie, a man annihilates his dignity as a man. Immanuel Kant. Shock, embarrassment, confusion, and anger tend to be the experiences and emotions of someone who has been duped. Think back to a time when you have been lied to. What did you experience? What did you feel? Now, put the proverbial shoe on the other foot. What did you feel, think, or experience when you lied to someone? Liars often experience guilt, shame, fear, satisfaction, relief, or anxiety reduction. As discussed throughout this book, the perspective of the lie teller or lie receiver matters. The perspective is important when examining the consequences of lies as well, especially as we consider the consequences of big liars' dishonesty. In this chapter, we examine the consequences of lying, consequences for the lie teller and lie receiver, and the broad societal and philosophical implications of big liars and the consequences of their lies. The consequences of lies are separate from motivations to lie, and the motivation behind a lie does not always align with the consequences of the lie. Antisocial lies that are maliciously intended, are hurtful, certainly, are the ones people close to us tell so that they can cover an embarrassing transgression or spare themselves shame. In fact, the lies that are told to conceal relational misdeeds are the least forgivable and most difficult from which to regain trust. Some researchers have discussed the consequences of lies based on their seriousness. Deception researchers have referred to less consequential lies as little lies, everyday lies, or low-stakes lies, while more consequential lies are referred to as big lies, serious lies, or high-stakes lies. Some people may justify their lies based on this categorization, claiming that it is acceptable to lie because the lie is inconsequential. Maybe you have caught yourself thinking, "It's just a little white lie," or "This is just a harmless little fib." Classifying a lie as harmless or inconsequential can allow someone to minimize or avoid guilt from telling a lie. However, as we have noted, the intent to not cause harm by telling a little white lie does not guarantee that the lie will be inconsequential. Lying is diverse as humans are dynamic. Most people do not tell one single lie in a vacuum, leading to one specific outcome. Lying often has unforeseen consequences. A number of motivations and sources of influence lead people to lie in various situations. Thus, the weight a person gives to the consequences of lying may depend on the perspective of the lie, teller or receiver, motivation or intent, the type of the lie told, the intended target or targets of the lie, the relational closeness to the target or targets of the lie, and the outcome of the lie. Despite the complex dynamics and nuances of communication and lying, there is a strong historical prohibition against lying across cultures. Simply, most people tend to think of lying as bad and honesty as good. However, big liars may find exception to this thinking. Web of lies. I was caught in a web I never wanted to end up in. I hate spiders. I was falling, not in love, but into his web of lies. Someone blogging about being duped by a big liar. Learning theory is fairly intuitive. As discussed in Chapter 7, when a behavior produces a good outcome, people are more likely to engage in that behavior again. The consequences are not only separate from motivations to lie, they can also influence one's motivation to lie. Successful outcomes may reinforce and promote more lying behavior. For example, if you lie on a first date by indicating that you are a fan of the newest pop song, your date may think well of you, which secures a second date. Unsuccessful or aversive outcomes may lead to one of two paths: a decrease in future lying behavior or an increase in attempts to tell more plausible and persuasive lies. For example, if a kid lies to their parents and gets caught, then they may be grounded, have to do extra chores, or lose some privileges. These unpleasant consequences may diminish the likelihood of sneaking out of the house and lying. Alternatively, someone who gets caught lying about sneaking out of the house may learn that they must better cover up their tracks in the future. Thus, two pathways can reinforce people's lying behaviors: positive outcomes from successfully telling lies, or beneficial outcomes from avoiding being caught telling a lie. Learning principles help to explain why some people become big liars. Through reinforcement, their small lies grow into mini lies, or a web of lies. It may be difficult to understand why big liars lie. Most people get by just fine using the truth. It seems foreign to rely so heavily on lies to navigate the world. Most people are largely honest because honesty works well across most situations, whereas lying can be very costly. Historical codes, laws, and literature have documented the grave consequences for those who lie. Death was the punishment for liars according to the Code of Hammurabi. Lying was also deemed deserving of death in Roman law and in the medieval law of France. The Bible indicates that the consequences of lying to God can be death, and there are also accounts of some societies cutting out tongues as a punishment for slander or lying. Some controversial modern parental practices have included putting hot sauces or spices on children's tongues as a punishment for lying. Along with the external consequences, lies tend to cause other problems within relationships and often sever trust. Lying can negatively affect relationships, vocations, finances, and other areas of private and public life. So, if lying has traditionally resulted in severe consequences, then why do big liars continue to lie? Do big liars avoid negative consequences or avoid getting caught? Think back to the theory of big liars. The consequences of lying are perceived as tolerable. People who are being lied to typically do not perceive the consequences as tolerable. In general, most people are averse to liars, and especially big liars. Thinking about the consequences of lies from the perspective of the dupe, especially when it is us, is likely a large reason that most people think of lying as bad. Most people do not enjoy being duped by others, as it tends to lead to negative thoughts, emotions, and attitudes. In fact, the word liar is rated as the least likable personality trait of 555 descriptors. Given the long-standing historical accounts of negative consequences of lying, what might lead a person to continue to lie? Do big liars believe these consequences are tolerable? We examine the perspective of the lie teller and how consequences can shape their behavior, but first we examine the perspective of the dupe. What the liar perceives as harmless or even beneficial may not be so in the eyes of the deceived. This quote highlights the importance of perspective. The importance of perspective for the justification of behavior has been evidenced within laboratory studies. Victims of lies tend to view dishonesty as more aversive than those who perpetuate the lies. Often, being on the receiving end of a lie can be painful. Behind the eyes of the duped. Yes, lies are ruining my relationship. I love my partner so much, and I do everything for her. I think I'm losing her, though, because I just don't know how to trust her anymore. One lie is one thing. 2 lies isn't so bad either, but the same lies over and over again? I don't know what to do. Anonymous online post. I have been married for years. I never thought he was a liar within the 6 months of marriage. Then he started to change stories he originally told me, many times with the same facts always, to, I never said that, or that never happened. I just don't get the lying and why he is destroying all my trust in him. I feel like our whole relationship is a lie and he is using me as a mental science project. I do not like what is going on, and when I confront him, he lies about lying. It is frickin' weird. I love him and think he is a hard worker and good provider, but I do not trust anything he says. anonymous online post. Lying, at its core, involves communication and relationships. One of us knew a therapist who used to tell patients that the people who can hurt you the most are those who you have seen naked and those who have seen you naked. Of course, the focus is not about being naked, but rather about the relational closeness. The people who fall into this category are parents, significant others, and children. Basically, the people who can hurt us the most are those with whom we are the closest and most vulnerable. Thus, merely being duped does not always lead to the same emotional experiences. Being lied to by the cashier at the grocery store is experienced vastly different than being lied to by your most beloved significant other. Evidence related to the frequency of lying behavior and relationships is not consistent. Some research suggests that people tell fewer lies to others with whom they are in emotionally close relationships than to people who are less close. On the other hand, some research suggests that people tell more lies to family and friends than to strangers. Moreover, other research suggests no differences in lie frequency based on relationship type. Even so, most people tend to believe that complete honesty is absolutely essential for romantic relationships. Thus, being lied to by an intimate relationship partner tends to directly threaten this expectation and usually leads to shattered trust along with negative thoughts and emotions. Trust. Trust and honesty are essential components of communication and human interactions. Bach suggested a thought experiment that reveals the importance of trust and honesty. She asked us to imagine a society, no matter how ideal in other respects, where word or gesture could never be counted upon. Take a moment to engage in this thought experiment. Consider yourself going through your day and deeply examining every single word from significant others, family, friends, co-workers, store clerks, and strangers to evaluate truthfulness. You could not trust anything that was ever said. Does that sound like a mentally taxing world? Bach also said that questions asked, answer given, information exchanged, all would be worthless. Trust is vital to the fabric of human existence and social interactions. Actions speak louder than words. Talk is cheap. These adages reflect the importance of actions for trust within relationships. Benjamin Franklin is credited with saying, "It takes many good deeds to build a good reputation, and only one bad one to lose it." Acting in a consistent and honest way fosters trust. Lying may be the one bad deed that easily unravels a good reputation or destroys trust. Deception poses negative consequences for relationships and breeds distrust. People typically operate with a truth bias, automatically assuming the veracity of others' words. An instance of discovered deception may activate the label of liar. Consequently, when thinking of someone as a liar, you might dismiss their words outright or find yourself sifting through content to discern fact from fiction. Some researchers have used a trust game to experimentally test Franklin's adage and discern whether trust is fragile or easily broken and difficult to repair. The researchers looked at several aspects of deception and trust and found that A. Deception damaged long-term trust. B. Promises were influential in early trust recovery, but not long-term trust recovery. C. An apology did not influence trust recovery. D. Prior deception decreased the effectiveness of a promise in restoring early trust. And E. Recurrent trustworthy behaviors increased long-term trust. Thus, Franklin appeared to be spot on in his assessment. The research findings on deception and trust are often played out within relationships, specifically if one lies to conceal a transgression. We have worked with a variety of patients and couples who lied to conceal some relational misdeeds. A typical pattern within the relationship: was that the person who committed a transgression and lied about it would ask for forgiveness and promise never to transgress again and never to lie again. However, the person who was duped often could not accept the apology, forgive the person, and recover full trust. Trust had to be re-established and earned again. The person who lied could not promise away the misdeeds to restore trust, but had to act continuously in ways that recovered trust over time. The pathway to recovered trust was not necessarily easy, as the liar's motivations and actions were now taken with a grain of salt or were judged with suspicion. Relational vulnerability and trust come at a cost. Not trusting others until they prove themselves to be trustworthy is a means to defend oneself against being hurt or lied to. It also prevents being relationally close to others. Thus, the risk of relational closeness includes the risk of being hurt, duped, or having one's trust violated. Once someone's guard is dropped and they have been hurt by a lie, they may become very guarded and suspicious in relationships. In these ways, lying in close personal relationships can be very costly. Cognitions. When discovering that someone has lied to you, various thoughts may enter your mind. Think back to a time when you were duped. Were you in denial, confused, wondering how you missed the signs, or did you find yourself taking a moment to connect the pieces? Alternatively, you may have wondered why someone you cared about deeply had betrayed you and what this betrayal may have meant for your relationship, and you may have sifted through memories trying to figure out what else was a lie. One woman who was married to a pathological liar anonymously wrote, "When I found out about an affair almost 2 years ago was when I began really putting the pieces together, realizing how much damage has been done to my heart and marriage." In fact, many of these thoughts fuel people's emotional experiences when they discover a deception. Sometimes we deny that we have been lied to. It can take a lot of mental energy to sift through relational history to separate fact from fiction. It may be cognitively and emotionally easier to overlook a lie to continue in a relationship. Admitting that one has been duped may lead to cognitive dissonance, which is likely to occur when a person recognizes someone is lying yet does not want to confront the liar or terminate the relationship. It might be easier to change one's attitudes and beliefs or to convince oneself that it wasn't really a lie, that it wasn't that bad, or that it probably won't happen again. Sometimes people want to assume that they can trust the person who lied, or they want to rely on a good, seemingly honest history. The woman mentioned earlier, who was married to a pathological liar, wrote, "I had begun to trusting him again, and for the 3rd time in our marriage he agreed to go to counseling." In the face of a lie, we may find ourselves hanging on to hope that it was an isolated event and that the future will be better. In some relationships, leaving the person may not seem like an option. An old adage states that you can choose your friends and significant others, but you cannot choose your family. Some people struggle with family members who are big liars. They are torn between the yearning to be in a relationship and the desire to avoid being duped. We may collude with others in their dishonesty, denying or looking past the fact that we have been lied to. When people discover they have been lied to, they often want to know why. You may have found yourself puzzled, trying to understand why someone would lie to you. People are often seeking to understand the causes of behavior. We expect the truth from people, but we don't question why someone is truthful. We seek to understand only the reason that people lied, likely because lying violates our expectations that others will be honest. We tend to be interested in their reasons for lying because those reasons are directly tied to relational concerns. In relationships, it is critical to know if someone is a cooperator or if they are an adversary. Knowing someone's reasons for lying informs us about whether the person is inclined to support us or undermine us. We may even tolerate a certain degree of lying in a relationship if the reasons are benevolent. People generally think negatively about others telling lies, especially when they are on the receiving end of the lie. In several of our studies, we found that people generally hold negative attitudes toward others who lie. These studies suggested that people tend to think of others who lie more negatively than those who are honest. They tend to view them as less good and less likable. They say they have less interest in interacting with them, trust them less, and view them as less sincere. Furthermore, these studies suggest that people think of others who lie as less successful, less compliant, less pleasant, and less well-adjusted than people who are honest. In a series of studies, researchers examined the effects of being lied to, as well as the ways in which people perceive those lies. In one study, participants were asked to read personal information about someone and subsequently watch a video interview of that person. Unbeknownst to the participant, the written information was altered so that it was discrepant from the video interview, thus making it appear that the individual had lied. Participants then rated the person's trustworthiness and likability. Overall, the people who appeared to lie were deemed less trustworthy and less likable than the people who appeared to be truthful. In another study in the series, pairs of participants were asked to become acquainted for 10 minutes. As participants engaged in conversation, they were unknowingly videotaped. Afterward, the researchers asked the participants if they had lied during the conversations and how much they liked their conversational partners. The results indicated that the more a person lied, the less they were liked. That is, people dislike liars, even when they don't know the person is lying. Negative emotions. Anyone who has ever been on the receiving end of a lie from someone they are close to can understand the very intense emotional consequences of a lie. Bach stated that people who have discovered deception about an important issue are resentful, disappointed, and suspicious. Think of times when you have been duped. What emotions did you experience? To highlight some of the emotional experiences of people who have been duped by pathological liars, we share comments expressed in some anonymous blog posts that we identified in our research. One time I love, and then something switches, and I am angry toward her. Even with counseling, I feel I can only fake it when I'm down and pretend not to be. But the hurt goes all the way to my core, and it's been going on for 40 years. Married man writing about his wife of 42 years. My husband has been deceiving me for almost 18 years. We have had many confrontations, conversations, counseling, etc. When I found out about an affair almost 2 years ago was when I began really putting the pieces together, realizing how much damage has been done to my heart and marriage. No matter what I tell him, such as had you told me the truth I would have understood your reasons, I get to where I never know when you are lying or telling the truth. Put yourself in my shoes and tell me if you would feel hurt or angry, etc., etc. Married woman writing about her husband. This is recent, and in the early moments when the anger goes away, I asked myself, maybe if he seeks therapy, maybe. But a compulsive or pathological liar rarely ever admits the issue and seeks help. Instead of confronting him when he lied, I should have said, I don't care what you were doing when you disappeared. The issue is that this is hurting me, and I don't want to hurt. I want to be happy, and I can't be happy with this. Let go of anger and choose peace. Watch comedy to get your mind off the sadness for a bit. Very helpful in the first days. Do not fall for any emotional games. When my son would ask me why I broke up with him, I told him he hurt my feelings a lot and told me lies. Remain hopeful. Woman writing about her boyfriend of 5 years. When I was 17, she told me my father was not my real father. That same day, while my dad was on a business trip, she said she was taking me to meet my real father at a restaurant. I didn't know what to think. I must have been in shock. Woman writing about her mother. When I called him and he finally picked up, he was too sick to talk, but I could literally hear him faking his cough. Even if he was sick, he could have at least let me know he wasn't able to pick me up and see me on my birthday. How could he do something like that, especially because it would probably be our last week together? Not only did this make me feel sad, I also thought it was unjust. Woman writing about her boyfriend. Many of the people who wrote about being duped expressed anger, surprise, embarrassment, shame, sadness, fear, or disgust. People often feel anger when they were threatened or violated. Lies threaten trust in the relationship. Someone who learns that a significant other has been secretly using their finances to gamble may become enraged that the expected relational trust was violated. Being told lies may also lead to shock or surprise. Trusting someone with an assumption that the person is honest may lead to surprise if this expectation is challenged. Furthermore, a person could experience embarrassment if the discovered deception occurs around others or if the person believes that they should have been able to detect deception better. Discovered lies can also lead to feeling shame if a person believes they are defective, derelict, or deserving of being lied to. Lies can lead to sadness that results from loss of trust or possibly the termination of the relationship. Discovered deception can lead someone to experience fear because they don't know the person's other motives and intentions. Lastly, people may experience moral disgust with another person because of their lies. One of the earliest studies to investigate the emotional outcomes of discovered deception suggested that relational involvement, information importance, and lie importance were all associated with emotional intensity. Essentially, people who discovered deception within a relationship experienced negative emotions. The researchers found that the degree of emotional intensity was largely influenced by involvement in the relationship. Intensity was high when the lie contained information viewed as important and the act of lying was perceived to be significant. Their findings also suggested that negative emotional intensity was related to ending the relationship, which was also largely influenced by the importance of the information that someone lied about. Think about times that someone lied to you in a relationship in the past. How did you feel? If the information that was lied about was very important, did you end the relationship? In some of our research on pathological liars, one person wrote, "I never thought stopping lies can be this hard. I divorced my wife because she couldn't stop lying. 99% of whatever she says was just a lie, and she never told the truth, and that hurt me a lot in a relationship." Lying affects many relationships. Two psychologists compiled various accounts of psychotherapists who were lied to and the emotional toils of being duped by patients. The deceptions often led therapists to feeling angry, surprised, embarrassed, and shamed. One case, mentioned in Chapter 3, involved a person who fabricated an entire therapy session. When the patient revealed to the therapist that he made up the entire persona to see if he could fool a master of human behavior, the therapist reported feeling used, violated, and angry, like a chump. The therapist also reported difficulty trusting other clients. Another therapist reported that a patient who was deceptive about several aspects of therapy and took on fake identities left him scared, wondering if he was being stalked. Finally, embarrassment was reported by a therapist who claimed he was duped by a male client who fabricated a persona that he believed appeased the therapist. A little white lie. Are some lies less harmful? Hello, how are you? How many times each day are you asked this question? How many times do you lie and tell other people you are doing well or say that you are good even when you are not? This typical social interaction is entirely disingenuous. Most people mechanically ask people how they are without a real concern to know the truth. In turn, people tend to lie in response because they know people don't really want to know how they are. If you were to tell people the truth by crying and confessing that you are completely devastated by the recent loss of your pet, or that you are highly stressed about the various demands of life, or that you have become lethargic and do not want to face the day, then you risk an awkward social exchange. Not all lies are equal. White lies, also referred to as altruistic lies, pro-social lies, and benevolent deception, are given such names because they reflect the idea that the lies are good, pure, helpful, or useful for others. People who tell white lies tend to think of them as producing good consequences, usually aimed at helping others. However, although white lies may be less harmful than other types of lies, they do sometimes have negative consequences. Good intentions and motivations do not always guarantee that a white lie will produce a positive outcome. For instance, in romantic relationships, white lies are not as helpful as lie tellers believe them to be. White lies are generally judged to be good by the person telling them, but less so for the person receiving them. Also, people who are inclined to use white lies within their intimate relationships tend to have less relational satisfaction than those who opt to be more honest. The intent of white lies does seem to matter in how people evaluate them. For instance, a person who tells benevolent lies to spare another person's feelings is viewed as being more moral than someone who tells an avoidable, painful truth. Sometimes it is challenging to be truthful and compassionate at the same time. When benevolence and honesty come into conflict with each other, people largely see benevolence as the more important of the two. That is, people tend to see it as more ethical to tell compassionate white lies than avoidable, harmful truths. Although people who tell benevolent lies may be viewed as compassionate, they are also viewed as having less integrity than people who are honest. Overall, researchers generally agree that white lies tend to be judged as the least harmful type of lie, and they are considered to be the most ethical lies to use. The liar. People generally tend not to think of themselves as liars. Liars are the others who have harmed us, the ones who have broken our trust and hurt us, the bad people who have no concern for truth and trust. We lie for a good reason: to spare someone else some unfortunate consequence, to protect others from trauma, to properly raise our children, to save a relationship, or to help people avoid some awkward social situation. Bach pointed out that liars share with those they deceive the desire not to be deceived. Remember, however, that when you tell a lie, you tend to have a different perspective of the reason and the predicted consequences of your lies than the person who receives it. Understanding these differences in perspective allows us to understand liars more fully by examining our own behavior and the times that we have lied. Thinking of our own lies and the consequences that follow can shed light on understanding the various consequences of lying for the person who tells the lie. We thus now turn our attention toward the perspective of the liar. Thinking of oneself as a liar is weighty. Thinking of oneself as a big liar is an even bigger burden to bear. Most people, even big liars, like to think of themselves as good and honest people overall. When their beliefs that they are good people don't line up with the fact that they are consistently lying, an uncomfortable mental state called cognitive dissonance arises. To reduce the distress caused by their internal contradictions, someone who lies a lot may justify a lie with the argument that what they said wasn't actually a lie, or that it produced good, or at least benign, consequences. If they are able to reconcile their lying and their positive view of themselves, they may be more apt to tell future lies. Essentially, if someone can distance themselves from seeing themselves as a liar, they will find it easier to lie again. Let's consider a statement from an anonymous person writing about his dishonesty. I have cheated in a past relationship. It was probably the worst thing I've ever done, but I do not regret it. I feel that we both would not be where we are without it. Since then, we have communicated about all of the faults of our relationship and have agreed that we were not meant to be with one another. This was my greatest example of lying and deceiving another person. This lie can be thought of as a phoenix lie, a lie believed to be some metamorphosis or necessary for some transformative good. In essence, the end justifies the means. The person recognized and admitted that lying about cheating was the worst thing they had ever done, and then seemingly justified the behavior by claiming that it was necessary for them to be in their current place in life, and that they became completely honest because of that lie. People may tell lies like these where they feel guilty and then resolve the dissonance by changing how they think about the lie. From a behavioral perspective, it is easy to see why most people do not often tell lies. Lies are often punished. So, why do big liars tell many lies? Behaviorally, the consequences of successful lies, not getting caught, are reinforcing. In some cases, people may feel excited in anticipation of telling a lie, or may have a sense of pleasure or gratification from successfully deceiving others. As discussed in Chapter 5, Ekman referred to the pleasure people feel from telling lies as duping delight. Ekman argued that after telling lies, people may find pleasure from relief or a feeling of accomplishment, or they may have feelings of superiority and contempt for the target. A very basic aspect of duping delight can be seen in a poker player who has successfully led others to believe that their hand is not a good one. More consequentially, consider the person who feels good about pulling off a big con. Ekman argued that when criminals confess their lies to others, they may experience duping delight. He suggested that duping delight is most likely when others are watching, or may know about the lie or recognize the liar's ability to craft a believable deception. He discussed the case of U.S. naval officer John Anthony Walker, Jr., who was convicted of spying and sentenced to life in prison. Walker is infamous as one of the most damaging spies in the United States. This most successful spy was handed over to the FBI by his ex-wife after he boasted to her about the amount of money he made, even though he was not making alimony payments. His duping delight was his undoing. In other cases, unfaithful romantic partners have intentionally introduced their partners to someone they were having an affair with just for the thrill of seeing if they could avoid being caught. The cat-and-mouse game of lying seems to be exhilarating for some people. To empirically examine duping delight in a laboratory setting, a group of researchers focused on what they called cheater's high. Participants typically predicted that they would feel guilty about unethical behavior, although they experienced more positive effect than people who did not engage in unethical behavior. The positive emotions were not tied to a specific financial reward, but rather were related to the high of having gotten away with something. It is very likely that some big liars feel good when they lie and get away with it. That delight could reinforce telling more and more lies, or trying to tell a bigger lie successfully. Even if a person does not experience duping delight, the gains from telling a successful lie may outweigh the consequences of getting caught. For example, if someone avoided multiple instances of relational conflict and reaped several gains by lying, then the reinforcement of getting away with it is stronger than the punishment from being caught and shamed a few times. In other words, the magnitude of the punishment may not be as great, especially if it is minor guilt imposed by another instead of a more costly punishment, as the magnitude of the reinforcement, achieving some self-serving goal or covering up a misdeed. In these instances, lying behavior may develop and strengthen as the person learns to refine their lying abilities by being more persuasive. Big liars tell numerous lies and/or big lies, so they may eventually become desensitized to the negative consequences of telling lies and may yearn for the positive feelings of getting away with lying. Bach suggested that after the first lies, others can come more easily. Psychological barriers wear down, lies seem more necessary, less reprehensible. The ability to make moral distinctions can coarsen. The liar's perception of his being caught may warp. As Sophie Vanderzee argues, when you lie or cheat for your own benefit, it makes you feel bad. But when you keep doing it, that feeling goes away, so you're more likely to do it again. Thus, someone who gets caught lying may initially feel guilt or shame, but as they repeatedly tell lies and have exposure to those emotions, they may feel those emotions less often or less intensely, in turn increasing the propensity to lie. Lying may also increase as a person tells additional lies to alleviate feelings of guilt resulting from an initial lie. An example can be found in this lie a person wrote about from a study we conducted with some other colleagues. "Sometimes I lie to my friends and family about skipping class. If they ask if I skipped, I'll tell them the class got canceled because it makes me feel less guilty, and they will react better if I tell them it was canceled versus if I tell them I skipped." At a neurological level, some research has provided evidence that the brain may adapt to dishonesty. Garrett and colleagues investigated dishonesty using brain imaging and a behavioral task that provided opportunities to be deceptive. Participants in the study communicated to another person, whom they believed was also a participant, about the amount of money in a jar. Findings revealed diminished amygdala sensitivity from deceptive acts, which also predicted an increase in future dishonest acts. The researchers suggested that these findings reveal a neurological explanation for why smaller acts of dishonesty may lead to bigger lies. Essentially, the emotional centers in our brains habituate or react with less intensity the more that we lie. Thus, bigger liars may habituate to the lies told, seeing potential negative consequences as tolerable and the potential positive consequences as worth it. Taken together, the research suggests that big liars may cognitively rework how they view lies. They may reap some rewards that outweigh potentially negative consequences, and they may become desensitized to negative consequences or negative emotions related to lying. Bach indicated that when people decide to lie, they tend to underestimate harm they experience directly themselves, as well as the harm to social interactions at a broad level. We discuss each of these situations in the next sections. Harm to themselves. When we typically think of big liars, we think of the harm they cause others. Do big liars cause themselves harm? When we decide to lie, we tend to calculate future outcomes erroneously, whether thinking that telling a lie will protect others or that the lie will not cause us any harm. Not only are big liars unable to accurately predict how their lies will affect others, but they also cannot accurately assess how their lies will affect themselves. Let's consider a lie told by someone who self-identified as a compulsive liar in an anonymous online forum. "Usually my lies are about stupidly inconsequential things. Maybe this is why they've never had consequences. I'd lie convincingly about why I was late or what I'd been doing during the day. I'd lie about an anecdote, usually 99% truth, but then I'd add a little sentence or something that wasn't true. For example, it's true that a certain actor was filming outside my house and that I saw him, but when I told my friends about this, I added on that the actor had said hello to me, and though the rest was true, he had never said hello. Silly things like that. I could almost imagine it happening too. Perhaps part of my problem is enhanced by an overactive imagination. So yes, many small, silly lies. Until now. I lied to my doctor. Yes, that bad. And this has led to a chain of events that has made me miserable. I said I had migraines with aura. I don't know why, but I just did. The thing is, you can't be on the combined contraceptive pill if you have migraines with aura. So despite being perfectly happy with the pill I was on, I was naturally transferred onto a progesterone-only pill. I didn't think twice about the fact I lied or what consequences it may have. It practically didn't occur to me until I started getting side effects from the new pill I was put on. Crippling depression, loss of appetite, inability to sleep, and much more. Without realizing it, I started to plan how I'd go back to the doctors and lie again to try and go back onto the combined pill. But there was just no way of getting around the lie. And so I realized what I'd done. I realized I'm a compulsive liar, and I went and told my doctor with the hope that my courage would be rewarded, that my lie would be wiped clean off the record, and I could go back to the pill I was on. But no, I can never go down that road again. He said I'd put him in a difficult position, that if something were to happen, if he put me back on the combined, he'd be committing professional suicide, and not to mention it would keep him up at night. So for the first time ever, my unintentional, pointless lies have had consequences, so I know I need help. Even when lying leads to some initial gain, it often results in unpleasant outcomes for the big liar further down the road. Think back to the spy who accrued so much money before being turned in by his ex-wife. The immediate consequence of his lies was tremendous financial gain, but eventually the result was life behind bars. You could imagine that if the spy entertained the notion of getting caught, he probably did not predict when and how, or that his ex-wife would be the one to turn him in. There are many examples in which a person acquires initial gains or avoids conflict from an initial lie, only to get caught eventually, or to suffer some other later consequences. Jesse Macbeth, a 23-year-old man, claimed to be an Army Ranger and said he was involved in war crimes in Iraq, killing hundreds of people. Macbeth recorded a video and posted it on the internet, claiming that he had burned the victims' bodies and hung them from rafters in the mosque. He was ultimately arrested for falsifying a Veterans Affairs claim and an Army discharge record. He then admitted to lying, falsifying documents, and stealing valor, and he apologized, saying, "I'm sorry, not only for lying about everything and discrediting anti-war groups, but also for defaming the real heroes, the soldiers out there sacrificing for their country. I was trying to pull a fast one, to make money to get off the streets." Lying clearly can eventually be costly. What about those little white lies? Can they be consequential for the lie teller? Fox stated generally that people tend to underestimate the harm that lies can cause the lie teller, and this is likely the case for white lies too. We may tell someone a white lie thinking that it spares their feelings or produces an in-the-moment good feeling without regard to other consequences. However, some research indicates that white lies are not as innocuous as people may think. Across 5 studies, researchers found evidence that white lies tend not to be innocuous. Among other negative outcomes, telling white lies causes the liar to have negative emotional experiences. How about the old saying that what someone doesn't know won't hurt them? Do big liars believe that lies are not harmful if no one finds out? Is lying inconsequential if not discovered? Even undiscovered deceptions can carry weighty consequences for the liar. Think back to the aforementioned examples. The woman who lied to her doctor about her medication could have potentially suffered some ill consequences if she never confessed her lie. Moving beyond anecdote, some researchers designed a study to examine whether undiscovered deception has negative consequences for liars. 81 participants initially met with a research confederate whom participants believed to be another participant. They were placed in a situation that led them either to lie to the confederate or to tell the truth. Then they were asked to rate their impressions of their partner, the confederate. Participants who lied to their partner rated their partner as less honest. The researchers called this tendency deceiver's distrust. Thus, lying to someone can influence the liar to perceive others as less honest. So, lying, even when undetected, can bring about negative consequences for the liar. Prolific lying generally causes problems for big liars. Sirota and Levine found that big liars are much more likely to have their romantic lives ruined by their deception than are people who lie much less. The big liars are significantly more likely to report that they have had romantic relationships end because of their lies, but the negative consequences of their lies don't end there. The big liars are also significantly more likely to be reprimanded by their boss or fired from their job altogether because of their dishonesty. The negative consequences of prolific lying seem to be quite severe. Perhaps those poor outcomes are why most people refrain from unrestrained lying. Harm to society. Lying on a broad scale can carry consequences for society. Lying can be costly for businesses, companies, agencies, or economies. The occurrence of deception within companies such as Enron and WorldCom led to costly financial consequences. Researchers have estimated that the economic costs following Enron and WorldCom were around $37 billion to $42 billion. Another area in which deception can be costly is insurance and healthcare. Fraud within the U.S. healthcare system is one of several factors that contributed to wasting approximately $750 billion in 2009. The National Healthcare Anti-Fraud Association wrote that fraud accounts for at least 3% of total healthcare expenditures, while some government and law enforcement agencies place the loss as high as 10% of our annual health outlay, which could mean more than $300 billion. In 2012, the FBI released a report that a Medicare fraud strike force had charged 107 individuals for approximately $452 million in false billing. The individuals charged included doctors, nurses, and other licensed medical professionals. The FBI director stated that healthcare fraud is not a victimless crime. Every person who pays for healthcare benefits, every business that pays higher insurance costs to cover their employees, every taxpayer who funds Medicare, all are victims. One of the biggest costs of deception comes from deceptive tax practices, such as underreporting income or claiming a higher deduction than allowed. Recently, Charles Rettig, the Internal Revenue Service Commissioner, indicated that the United States loses approximately $1 trillion in unpaid taxes annually. Tax fraud losses have more than doubled since 2013. Clearly, deception can be consequential on a massive scale, costing billions or even trillions. Ariely suggested that cheating is not necessarily due to one guy doing a cost-benefit analysis and stealing a lot of money. Instead, it is more often an outcome of many people who quietly justify taking a little bit of cash or a little bit of merchandise over and over. In an interview, Ariely stated, "We have run experiments on cheating with close to 50,000 people so far. We found a handful of big cheaters, and we lost a few $100s to big cheaters. We found more than 30,000 little cheaters, and we lost tens of thousands, $60,000, $70,000 to the little cheaters. We think about the big cheaters, but the reality is that the economic activity that we need to worry about is all the little cheaters." Ironically, Ariely's research has recently come under scrutiny with accusations of being deceptive and fraudulent. Other researchers examined Ariely and colleagues' work related to a field experiment with an auto insurance company and concluded that the data was fabricated. Ariely created a written response indicating that he agreed with the conclusions from the other researchers and stated that he was not involved in the data collection, data entry, or merging data from the insurance database. For Ariely, the consequences are more scrutiny of his work, people being more cautious of his findings, and some people dismissing his credibility altogether. While a lot of people who each tell a few lies can cumulatively lead to a significant financial loss, the reality is that great financial losses often come from big liars. Think back to the FBI Medicare fraud strike force. A small group of 107 individuals was responsible for $452 million in false billing. Individuals such as John Anthony Walker, Jr., use deception in ways that are monumentally costly for organizations in the economy. The resulting losses are certainly significant and are attributed to a small group of people who engaged in repetitive deception and fraud. While the potential for huge losses may incline us to detect big liars, sometimes people may want to be lied to. Whether we admit it or not, we sometimes tolerate, accept, or collude with liars, even big liars. It may be easier to wantonly believe that a person is being honest than it is to deal with confrontation and conflict. Additionally, we may accept big lies or big liars because they advance our own beliefs or political positions. Bach discussed the noble lie, which she credited to Plato and political philosophers. The noble lie involves lying for the sake of the public. We may find ourselves overlooking evidence of lies from our political leaders or government officials because we think they have our best interests in mind, or that they are generally honest people because they share our values. Of course, we tend to think that the people we like and with whom we share similar values are not big liars, whereas we may think that the representatives of political views that we do not endorse are big liars who have lies constantly flowing out of their mouths. Conclusion. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. That old adage about dishonesty cautions us that if we do not confront the big liars around us, the negative consequences will be even greater for us in the future. We may turn a blind eye to liars either in our personal lives or more broadly in society because to confront them often makes us uncomfortable or is difficult to do. However, if big liars have no substantial consequences for their deceit, we should expect people to continue to be big liars. So, how might we avoid these consequences? If we can detect deception, might we avoid the dangers of being caught in the web of lies? In Chapter 9, we examine what many years of psychological science has to offer about detecting deception. Chapter 9. Detecting Lies and Big Liars. It takes two to lie, one to lie and one to listen. Homer Simpson. Imagine asking someone whom you believe to be lying to fill their mouth with dry rice. If the rice stays dry, then you know they are a liar. This ancient method of lie detection was used in China. One sure way to tell if someone is a liar is to see if they are more than 3 years old. Most people begin telling lies after age 3. However, we are usually not too interested in whether or not someone is a liar, as most of us are liars. Instead, we are usually interested in deciding whether a person is lying in the moment or was lying in the past about something specific. Determining whether someone is lying about some information is often quite difficult. A $1 million business idea would be to develop a method to identify lies accurately and consistently. Detecting deception would be a simple task if the story of Pinocchio were reality, if people's noses grew as they lied. Unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, there is no Pinocchio's nose or any other singular behavior clue that is a telltale sign of lying. Instead, lying is dynamic, contextual, and situational, and it involves multiple psychological layers, making its detection a formidable task. As big liars can cause havoc and significant financial loss for relationships, companies, agencies, and governments, a premium has been placed on seeking ways to detect deception. The United States alone has funded dozens, if not hundreds, of research programs focused on developing effective ways to detect deception. In the United States, the FBI and Department of Defense have provided millions of dollars for projects that examine ways to detect deception. Other U.S. agencies, such as the CIA, also have a vested interest in deception and its detection. One controversial method for separating truth from lies is enhanced interrogation. The CIA used enhanced interrogation to acquire intelligence after the attacks on the United States on September 11, 2001. It isn't a lie detection technique. Rather, it is a truth extraction technique based on the idea that a dishonest person might confess the truth if certain physical inducements were applied. The enhanced interrogation techniques used by the CIA consisted of the attention grasp, walling, the facial hold, the facial slap, insult slap, cramped confinement, wall standing, stress positions, sleep deprivation, use of diapers, and use of insects. Waterboarding. In 2014, the U.S. Senate Select Committee on Intelligence issued a report on the CIA's detention and interrogation program. The committee chairperson, Dianne Feinstein, wrote that these methods were brutal interrogation techniques. it is questionable whether those techniques successfully elicited truthful intelligence, and there is controversy around whether enhanced interrogation techniques constitute torture. Using torture to detect deception has a long history. E.B. Ford suggested that some of the earliest lie detection techniques involved a suspect enduring ordeals of fire or water. For the fire tests, a person was forced to carry a hot iron or walk across coals to demonstrate their honesty. If they were burned, then supposedly the person was lying and deserved death. In a water test, a person was tied in a sack and thrown into a body of water. Liars, allegedly, would float instead of sink, and they would subsequently be executed. Truthful people, presumably, would sink and then would be retrieved from the water, hopefully before they drowned. Imagine if we still used these techniques today within our judicial systems. Around 1000 BCE, the Chinese attempted to detect deception by having suspected liars place dry rice into their mouths and then spit it out. If the rice remained dry, then the person was guilty of lying. These practices were also used in India and West Africa, by Europeans in the Dark Ages, and by the Roman Catholic clergy in 1150 AD. The practices were based on a physiological conceptualization of lying. Liars would be fearful or anxious, and these emotions would cause a dry mouth. The connection of fear with lying has been historically robust and has largely influenced some modern lie detection techniques. Given the historical interest in lie detection, it is no surprise that interest in detecting deceit continues today and stretches across several disciplines and professions. Research on the detection of deception has increased dramatically since the 1980s, with more than 150 articles about deception and its detection published each year. For the last 100 years, behavior and lie detection are the typical topics of deception articles, but most lie detection methods have come about fairly recently. The ability to discern lies from truth is not just of interest to agencies, corporations, governments, and researchers. It also captures the imagination and interest of many laypeople. In early 2023, Google searches for information on how to detect lies reveals about 124 million results. Among these results are posts and videos, such as 7 ways to spot a lie, 10 signs to know if someone is lying, and 6 ways to detect a liar in seconds. Unfortunately, many of these methods are rooted in pseudoscience. For others, the claims have not been scientifically tested. One supposed deception expert, despite espousing claims that have no scientific basis, has published a book, and her popular TED Talk centered on supposedly proven ways to spot a liar boasts 17 million views. Interestingly, this proven technique is not proven at all. There is no empirical evidence to support its effectiveness or accuracy in detecting deception. Along with the endless suggestions of how to detect deception, people can find various films and television shows that feed the public's interest in spotting liars. The show Lie to Me portrayed a consulting group of deception detection experts who could read people's faces and determine if they were lying based on emotional expressions and nonverbal behaviors. While the show was inspired by the scientific discoveries of Dr. Paul Ekman, it does not make one a better lie detector, and it ironically perpetuates false beliefs about deceptive behavior. Another film that portrays deception detection techniques is Meet the Parents. The film depicts a suspicious father using a polygraph to test if his daughter's boyfriend is lying. The father states that polygraphs are very accurate and can easily determine if someone is lying or not. Clearly, many people have been and continue to be interested in deception detection, especially in trying to unearth big liars. So what do we know about the various methods? How accurately can we detect deception? Which methods can we use to detect big liars? The vast majority of deception research has focused on understanding and testing methods to detect deception more accurately. In this chapter, we review these techniques and discuss studies that have evaluated the effectiveness of each approach. Then we specifically examine how we might best navigate the world, detecting deception accurately and knowing when we have been lied to by big liars. Detecting deception. As long as there have been liars, people have tried to detect deceit. As the stakes of the lies increase, people are more motivated to catch the liars. We may place a higher premium on detecting the big liars. Broadly, we categorize lie detection as human or mechanical. Human deception detection methods rely primarily on a person to make determinations about veracity. These methods are strategies and approaches in which people base determinations on their own perceptions and judgments without the assistance of technology, instruments, or other apparatuses. For example, if someone tells you about their whereabouts the previous night, and you focus on specific cues or information to discern the truthfulness of their claims, you would be using a human deception detection method. Mechanical methods, in contrast, use technologies and data to discern truths and falsehoods. If you were to hook the person up to a polygraph or record and analyze their speech, you would be using a mechanical method of deception detection. Many lie detection methods have been documented historically, and some variations continue to be used today. Deception detection techniques typically rely on three general channels of information. A. Physiological responses, such as heart rate and brain activity. B. Overt behaviors, such as eye movements and fidgeting. And C. Speech patterns, such as vocal pitch and word choice. Human methods. He that has eyes to see and ears to hear may convince himself that no mortal can keep a secret. If his lips are silent, he chatters with his fingertips. Betrayal oozes out of him at every pore. A widely accepted assertion is that people can detect deception by others because behavioral evidence of their lies will become noticeable. Folk beliefs that when people lie they engage in certain patterns of behavior are widespread. For instance, people tend to think that others look away, fidget, or stammer when they are lying. We revisit some of these beliefs after first considering whether people are good at detecting lies. The overall findings of research on the human ability to detect deception are that people are not particularly adept at detecting deception. Most laboratory studies on human deception detection involved participants viewing videos of people lying or telling the truth and then making assessments about whether each person was honest or lying. Generally, half the videos show people being truthful, while the other half show people lying. Accuracy is then measured as the percentage of correct assessments. Merely guessing would result in 50% accuracy on average. Bond and DiPaolo analyzed 206 deception detection studies, which together comprised 4,435 senders, people lying or telling the truth, and 24,483 judges of deception. The researchers specifically examined studies of people who made real-time judgments from brief exposures to unfamiliar people, without any mechanical aids such as polygraphs. The researchers found that the judges identified lies and truths accurately on about 54% of all trials. That is, on average, people performed only slightly better than chance levels when assessing the veracity of statements. They were slightly better at classifying truthful statements than they were at classifying lies. Specifically, they correctly identified 47% of the lies and 61% of the truths. People were more accurate when assessing deception via audio than they were when assessing video deception. This finding suggests that perhaps people make more accurate judgments based on what they hear than on what they see. Are some people naturally gifted at detecting big liars? Some researchers have suggested that some experts or professionals have skill sets that make them more accurate lie detectors. For example, one study examined experts' ability to detect deception by recruiting people from various fields in which lie detection seemed important, including the U.S. Secret Service, CIA, FBI, National Security Agency, Drug Enforcement Agency, state police, judges, and psychiatrists. In the same study, the researchers also measured the lie detection abilities of college students and working adults. The results showed that only Secret Service agents performed better than chance levels, with a reported average accuracy of around 64%, while most of the other professional groups performed near chance levels, and not any better than the college students or working adults. Another study investigated the deception detection ability of 23 federal officers, 43 sheriffs, 36 law enforcement personnel, 84 federal judges, 107 practicing clinical psychologists with an interest in deception, and 334 psychologists with no special interest in deception. The researchers indicated that 3 professional groups with skills or interests in deception, i.e., federal officers, sheriffs, and deception-interested clinical psychologists, were most accurate at detecting deception, with federal officers showing the highest accuracy, 73% correct. However, Bond and DiPaolo included 19 studies of expert judges, e.g., law enforcement officers, and non-expert judges in their meta-analysis, and concluded that there was no evidence that experts are superior to non-experts in discriminating lies from truths. In fact, Bond and DiPaolo found that supposed experts correctly classified lies and truths only around 55% of the time, with 50% indicating chance responding. Though lie detection accuracy may be only slightly better than chance levels, the fact that the rates are above chance levels at all suggests that people have some capacity to detect liars. T.R. Levine attempted to explain why people seem to have some ability to detect liars. He suggested that most people are good liars who can easily avoid detection, yet some small proportion of the population are poor liars who transparently give themselves away with an obviously deceptive-looking demeanor. T.R. Levine suggested that if 10% of the population were transparent liars, then people would, on average, be slightly better than chance at detecting deception. Maybe big liars avoid detection because they are not transparent liars. T.R. Levine argued that we are hopelessly lost when trying to accurately detect deception in people, except for the few transparent liars. That, he suggested, is why human accuracy hovers around 54%. When people try to detect whether others are lying by merely observing their behavior, they erroneously rely too much on the sender's appearance and demeanor, which are not at all correlated with their actual honesty. Think about what you rely on when trying to detect liars, and especially big liars. Do you focus on appearance and how the person is behaving? You may be incorrectly judging people as honest simply because they have an honest demeanor or appearance. For instance, the person may have the face of an angel, look childlike and sweet, or otherwise be simply an honest-looking person. Our beliefs about what liars and honest folk look like influence our judgments about whether someone is being honest or lying. In fact, 2 studies found that facial appearances were associated with ratings of honesty. Specifically, judgments about others' believability were based on perceptions of how trustworthy their faces looked. If someone has a childlike face, we are likely to make a host of attributions about them, such as that they are kind, honest, and innocent. This tendency to view people with childlike faces as honest is related to a psychological phenomenon called the halo effect, in which a global evaluation of a person based on their appearance may affect judgments about other aspects of the person. Thus, some big liars who are highly charismatic or innocent-looking may be more likely than others to continue telling big lies. For example, many people had a difficult time believing that the serial killer Ted Bundy was lying because he was attractive, charismatic, and seemed to be an honest-looking person. On the other hand, people may engage in quirky or odd behaviors that make them appear less honest. Some researchers found that people who hold their arms above their head, tilt their head to the side, or violate social norms in other ways tend to be viewed with more suspicion and are judged as being deceptive even when being honest. Thus, particular behaviors or clinical impressions may lead to labeling someone inaccurately as lying when they are not. For instance, one study found that individuals who had autism spectrum disorder, ASD, were judged to be more deceptive than those who did not have ASD. The danger is that relying on expected social norms of honest behavior or inaccurate beliefs about dishonest behavior can lead people to incorrectly assume that someone is lying and subsequently to treat that person differently. We may expect big liars to fit a certain mold, being odd or quirky. However, some big liars may successfully tell many big lies without being detected merely because they look like honest people. Have you ever wondered if someone was a big liar and told yourself that they couldn't be because they were too nice, attractive, successful, or kind? Beliefs about liars. What does a big liar look like? For that matter, what does any liar look like? As long as there have been liars, there also have been beliefs about the appearances of liars. One specific belief about lying was documented around 900 BCE. The author suggested that when lying, a liar rubs his great toe on the ground, plays with his hair, has a discolored face, shakes, and tries to leave. This description aligns with beliefs about lying behavior that many people hold today, such as the notion that a liar fidgets and seems anxious. People hold many beliefs about what lying behavior looks like and what a good, honest person looks like. When you think about people who lie, what images come to mind? What about big liars? One of the most prevalent beliefs about liars is that they avoid eye contact or look away when practicing deceit. This belief is pervasive and is found among professional groups such as law enforcement officers, psychologists, forensic psychologists, and healthcare professionals. However, in a large meta-analysis, researchers found that these beliefs are incorrect and that estimates of eye contact had a negligible, almost absent effect. Other widely held, yet equally incorrect beliefs about liars are that people look up or look to the left when lying, that they fidget, and that they can't sit still. However, people generally can recount salient examples or people telling lies to our face without looking away. A popular example is former President Bill Clinton. President Clinton faced a crowd of reporters and declared that he did not have sexual relations with that woman, Miss Lewinsky. So, why do so many people, including professionals, think that liars look away when lying, or think that they engage in anxiety-related behaviors? Vridge suggested that those incorrect beliefs about deceptive behavior may originate from three misunderstandings that he refers to as moral, exposure, and accusation. The moral explanation is based on a common misconception that people feel ashamed and look away when they behave immorally. Thus, when someone turns away while speaking, they may be erroneously viewed as dishonest. The exposure explanation suggests that inaccurate media portrayals in which liars look away and act nervous promote inaccurate beliefs about liars. If one sees movies in which liars are nervously sweating and trembling, they may come to incorrectly believe that this is how real-life liars behave. The accusation explanation suggests that people confuse the behavior of someone who is accused with the behavior of someone who is lying. Thus, signs of nervousness stemming from being accused are misattributed as signs of dishonesty. These faulty beliefs may help to explain why we are not better lie detectors and how big liars get away with their lies. Hartwig and Gronhag distinguished the beliefs that people have about deceptive behavior, what they called subjective cues, from the actual cues of deception, which they call objective cues. Sometimes a belief about a deceptive cue may overlap the actual cues of deception. Other times the belief may exist without sufficient evidence to support it. For example, the subjective cue of eye contact is not at all an objective diagnostic cue of lying. Alternatively, some people believe that the pitch of a person's voice increases when they lie, and the existing evidence suggests that pitch does seem to be a diagnostic deception cue, albeit a weak one, of lying. An extensive review of the various cues to deception was conducted by DiPaolo et al., investigating 158 different cues. DiPaolo and colleagues found that some deception cues were stronger than others. For example, evidence suggested that cues, such as pitch and pupil dilation, were diagnostic, but less support was found for eye contact or smiling as diagnostic deception cues. It is important to keep in mind that a diagnostic cue is not the same as a definitive sign that someone is lying. Remember that no Pinocchio's nose or other specific behavior consistently predicts lying. So, while research suggests that pitch increases when people lie, the correlation is weak, and pitch also increases at other times when people are not lying. For instance, pitch often increases when people are excited, surprised, or even afraid. T.R. Levine argued and provided evidence that behavioral cues of deception are weak and inconsistent at best. Thus, while some marginal evidence may indicate that specific behaviors appear more often when someone is lying than when the person is telling the truth, those differences are too small and too inconsistent to be of any practical use in detecting deception. If Pinocchio's nose exists, it remains hidden. We cannot simply look at a big liar and accurately determine that they are lying. Placing stock in searching for diagnostic cues does not seem to be a great investment. However, research about cues is not futile, and learning about our beliefs about cues may, at least, make us aware that we may be erroneously making attributes about others' behaviors, especially when assessing big liars. We may be incorrectly labeling people as liars when they are nervous or showing signs of respect. For example, people may look away when they are nervous or being accused. People also may look away from perceived authority figures as a cultural display of respect and subsequently be judged as a liar. One pitfall of believing that people are anxious and look away when lying is that we may miss the big liars in our lives. Remember, big liars may lie without remorse, shame, or anxiety. Thus, these faulty beliefs about how liars behave may provide an advantage for big liars in their ability to successfully dupe others. Given the faulty beliefs and other factors that complicate human deception detection, are there any means by which people can more accurately detect deception? Mechanical methods. Two hallmarks of human beings are an intellect and the ability to manufacture and use tools. To compensate for our deficiencies, to improve processes, or for efficiency, we turn to tools. Where humans may have deficits, turning to mechanical means for assistance has long been valuable. To better detect deception, we have looked to other tools, assessments, and technology. In this section, we examine some of these mechanical methods. The polygraph. The ancient Chinese lie detection method of using rice in one's mouth to detect deception is evidence that people have long believed physiological responses are related to lying. This conceptualization is tied to the modern approach, the polygraph, which is likely what many people envision when they think of a lie detector. Of all deception detection tools, the polygraph has the longest tradition. First described almost 100 years ago, the words polygraph and lie detector are often used synonymously. In fact, some authors refer to polygraphs as lie detector tests. However, the polygraph is not a lie detector, but a machine that measures several physiological processes, e.g. heart rate, and changes in those processes. Although it is used to detect physiological changes thought to occur when people lie, the polygraph does not detect lies per se. The polygraph has often been portrayed on television, in movies, and on internet videos in ways that captivate people's imaginations. Since the 1980s, there have been several popular television shows in which polygraphs were used to discern if people were lying about relationships, affairs, the legitimacy of parenthood, and other issues. A plethora of internet videos also show celebrities and others undergoing interviews while connected to the polygraph to demonstrate their sincerity. The popularity of the polygraph is likely a result of its long tradition, its portrayal in popular media, and the suggestions of its infallible accuracy. So, how does it work? What is behind the enigmatic machine? The typical use of the polygraph is to measure physiological changes in various interview formats. One common technique is the control question technique, CQT. The CQT involves asking an individual several control questions, e.g., what is your name, that presumably they are answering truthfully, and targeted questions to which they may or may not be lying, e.g., on January 3rd, did you shoot your husband? If a person lies in response to a relevant question, they should show physiological changes, such as an increase in heart rate and blood pressure, which the machine should detect and that would betray them. Thus, the differences in physiological responses between the control questions and the relevant questions are considered evidence of deception. On the other hand, if a person showed no physiological differences when asked the control questions and the relevant questions, one might conclude that the person was answering honestly. Another technique was originally named the guilty knowledge test and is more recently referred to as the concealed information test, CIT. The CIT differs from the CQT in that it does not involve accusatory questions about an incident. Instead, the polygraph examiner asks only about the details of the incident, which would be known only to the police and the person who committed the crime. The questions include the accurate information and plausible but incorrect information. For example, if a person were being questioned about an automobile theft, the examinee might be asked whether the perpetrator stole a 2001 Toyota Camry, 2021 Ford F-150, 2015 Honda Civic, or 2019 Dodge Grand Caravan. A guilty examinee would presumably show a physiological response to the vehicle that was actually stolen and not the others. A person who was not involved in the crime would exhibit a similar physiological response to all vehicles. Although the polygraph is popular, it has also been controversial. At the heart of the controversy is the accuracy of the instrument, the ability of the polygraph to be a reliable lie detector. Regarding the accuracy of the polygraph, the National Research Council's conclusion was, notwithstanding the limitations of the quality of the empirical research and the limited ability to generalize to real-world settings, we conclude that in populations of examinees such as those represented in the polygraph research literature, untrained in countermeasures, specific incident polygraph tests can discriminate lying from truth-telling at rates well above chance, though well below perfection. So, what is well below perfection? The accuracy of the CQT in lab studies has ranged from 74% to 82% for guilty examinees, with 7 to 8% false negative rates, and 61% to 83% for innocent examinees, with 10 to 16% false positive rates. In simple terms, these percentages suggest that if polygraphs were administered to 100 people and 10 of them were actually guilty, the polygraph would accurately detect 8 of the 10 guilty people, but would also falsely implicate more than 10 of the innocent people. In field studies, the accuracy rates are 84% to 89% for guilty examinees, with 1 to 13% false negatives, and 59% to 75% for innocent examinees, with 5 to 29% false positive rates. For lab studies with the CIT, between 76% and 88% of guilty examinees are correctly identified, while 83% to 97% of the innocent examinees are correctly identified. Regarding the CIT in field studies, the ranges are 42% to 76% for correctly identifying guilty examinees and 94% to 98% for correctly identifying innocent examinees. Mayer and Verschuren suggested that although the CIT has controllable false positive rates and is grounded in theory, it is rarely used in field studies. The concern and controversy about the polygraph is typically rooted in its application and use. If it performs above chance but well below perfection, would you want potential employers to use it to make decisions about your employment? Would you be willing to have it determine your guilt or innocence in a criminal court case? Are you willing to use a measure that potentially falsely impugns between 5% and 29% of innocent people? Better yet, would this error rate be acceptable if trying to determine if someone was a big liar? These concerns about the accuracy rates are especially controversial when considering the contexts and consequences. Maybe the error rates are acceptable when trying to figure out which fellow employee ate your lunch, and maybe less desirable when applied to criminal convictions in capital cases. Concerns of accuracy and scientific controversy have influenced court rulings that deemed the polygraph not admissible as evidence within criminal courts. Vridge suggested that the CQT does not meet the guidelines set forth by the U.S. Supreme Court. Within employment settings, the Employee Polygraph Protection Act prohibits most private employers from using lie detector tests, which include polygraph, deceptograph, voice stress analyzer, psychological stress evaluator, or any other similar device, whether mechanical or electrical, that is used, or the results of which are used, for the purpose of rendering a diagnostic opinion regarding the honesty or dishonesty of an individual. Many of these rulings and policies are in place because of the perceived risks of wrongly convicting innocent people based on polygraphs results. There is room for adjustment and changes in these rulings and policies if newer techniques, coupled with scientific evidence, support more accurate assessments. Also, most of the rulings are based on the use of the polygraph with the CQT. Ben Shakar and colleagues suggested that the CIT can meet the required standards if administered carefully. Mayer and Verschuren agreed and suggested that, due to the low false positive rate, the CIT can safely be applied in the field. As there are many hints for how to detect lies, there are numerous websites that offer suggestions for how to beat lie detector tests, i.e., polygraph assessments. The idea of beating the polygraph suggests that the polygraph has a pass-fail threshold, but this is not true. The polygraph is an assessment, but the examiner ultimately makes a subjective determination about whether someone is likely answering honestly or not. Thus, beating the polygraph is primarily a process of convincing the examiner that you are honest. Could big liars skillfully navigate responses and convince others of their innocence when undergoing a polygraph? Psychopaths and people with an antisocial personality disorder may lie without feeling remorse or guilt, and they often have shallow emotional responses, and thus they do not fit the mold of the anxious and ashamed liar. They could go undetected when administered the polygraph because they lack emotional responses. If their heart does not pound wildly when they are accused of a crime, couldn't they sail through a polygraph exam undetected? What about people like Ted Bundy? Could his cool and unemotional reactions have helped him to tell lies for years without being detected? One study explored this question, specifically looking at whether the polygraph can discriminate between psychopaths telling the truth and those who are lying. Participants in their study were male prison inmates, half of whom were psychopathic and half of whom were not. Half of the psychopaths were randomly assigned to the guilty condition and were instructed to take a $20 bill when no one was looking and hide it in their pocket. Psychopaths in the innocent condition did not take a $20 bill. All participants were then instructed to deny having taken the money when undergoing a polygraph examination. The polygraph examiner, who did not know which participants were assigned to each condition, was able to successfully discern which psychopaths were lying and which ones were telling the truth with well above 80% accuracy. The conclusion seemed to suggest that some big liars, psychopaths, produce typical physiological responses when lying, thus allowing their detection via the polygraph. Following the publication of the Raskin and Hare study, Lukin discussed several concerns and limitations that affect the conclusions. Among the criticisms was that a mock crime may not translate to the real world. Arguably, real-world crimes carry weightier consequences and higher stakes, and people would be more highly motivated to keep their dishonest behavior from being detected. Lucan raised the concern that the participants may not have been trying to beat the lie detector, and if they were not, then the study did not show that psychopaths are unable to beat the test. He suggested that attempts to beat the lie detector would elevate physiological responses to control questions, e.g. biting one's tongue or tensing muscles, thus producing more inconclusive results. To revisit the question and address some of the criticisms posed by Lucan, Patrick and Iacono conducted a similar replication study. In an attempt to address the concern of high stakes and beating the polygraph, researchers told the participants that the goal was to beat a lie detector test and that each participant would receive a $20 bonus if no more than 10 of the 48 participants failed the polygraph. The idea was that the bonus would incentivize the participants to really try to beat the polygraph. The results of overall accuracy were 75% correct, 25% incorrect, and 0% inconclusive, and most errors were false positives, 10 out of 12. Their results also showed no differences between groups based on psychopathy. A review of psychopathy and the use of the polygraph with the CIT technique indicates that the research has been scant and has yielded mixed evidence. While a call for more research is needed in this area, Verschwoegen and colleagues suggested that the available evidence corroborates the notion that, for people high in antisociality, skin conductance responding is reduced in the CIT, and the autonomical hyporesponsive is responsible for the reduced detection in antisocial personalities. In short, lies told by psychopaths may be challenging to detect using the polygraph, but most are detected nonetheless. This research has primarily investigated psychopathy and the ability to beat the polygraph or to yield a classification of innocent or inconclusive. Less research and literature have addressed pathological liars or big liars and their ability to successfully beat a polygraph. One author indicated that the pathological liar certainly will not show any significant reaction to the lie detector test. What we have learned more recently about pathological liars' experiences of feeling distress and remorse may challenge the statement that pathological liars would not react to the polygraph. Vridge and colleagues suggested that good liars probably have diminished emotional reactions, specifically less guilt and less fear. It seems likely that this diminished emotionality while lying would be especially common in big liars. Because big liars are dishonest so regularly, they may have become desensitized to the typical emotions reactions one has when lying. More research is needed before we can draw any firm conclusions regarding whether big liars are better able to remain undetected on a polygraph. Linguistic analysis. As the old saying goes, the easiest way to tell if a politician is lying is to see if their lips are moving. This saying suggests that politicians' words are always untrue. Words are critical to the concept of lying. Digging deeper, we could say that lying requires communication, and communication typically is in the form of language or words. As noted in Chapter 1, deception has been defined as a successful or unsuccessful deliberate attempt without forewarning to create in another a belief which the communicator considers to be untrue. To address how lying is distinct from deception more specifically, we define lying as a successful or unsuccessful deliberate manipulation of language without forewarning to create in another a belief which the communicator considers to be untrue. Thus, lying is the manipulation of language. It makes intuitive sense, then, to explore methods of language analysis to detect lying. Since the 1950s, there has been a tremendous upsurge in research on verbal cues to detect deception. Most verbal assessments are conducted with three tools: statement validity analysis, SVA, reality monitoring, RM, and scientific content analysis, SCAN. The SVA is the more popular tool. It was developed to assess the credibility of child witnesses in sexual assault cases. The SVA involves 4 processes: a case file analysis, a semi-structured interview, criteria-based content analysis, CBCA, and a validity checklist. Essentially, people are trained to evaluate transcripts of interviews along 19 specific criteria, e.g., logical structure, quantity of details. The presence of more criteria within the transcript indicates a real or honest presentation. The assumption is that lying is cognitively more taxing than telling the truth, and people who lie often work harder to control their speech. One of the strongest findings of support for CBCA is that truth-tellers include more details in interviews than those who lie. Research accuracy indicates that CBCA identifies deception with 70% accuracy. The accuracy for SVA within criminal courts for sexual offenses is unknown. RM was not traditionally used as a deception detection tool, but psychologists have a long-standing history of finding creative ways to use and apply tools originally intended for some other psychological task. RM was developed to understand how memories based on external experiences may differ from those based on internal experiences. The premise of this technique is that truth-tellers' recollections of events are based on actual experiences, whereas liars only imagine the circumstances. So, if a criminal needed to produce an alibi, then they could fabricate a story in which they were out walking their dog, using their imagination to fill in the details. One of the strengths of the model is that it is theoretically rooted. A review of the research on RM suggests that it possesses some discriminative ability, correctly classifying most lies. Overall, the tool tends to produce an accuracy rate of around 70%, but it is not typically used by practitioners in the field. The scan was originally developed by a former polygraph examiner, Sapir, and is used across the world and by various agencies. The scan technique consists of asking someone to write down all their activities during a specific time period, usually during the time an incident or crime occurred. Similar to the other linguistic analysis techniques, the scan operates by comparing the statements against a dozen criteria. One criterion, for instance, is the denial of allegations. A truthful individual is presumed to be more likely to deny allegations directly. Weekly training classes are offered for scan examiners, requiring 32 hours and a $600 fee. One of the largest criticisms of scan is that it has a scant body of research support, with only 5 published studies. But even with this dearth of empirical support, scan tends to be used by many practitioners and agencies. A recent article argued that scan lacks empirical merit. Most lie experts agree that it does not have sufficient research to be used with law enforcement agencies, and most experts consider it to be pseudoscience. These verbal techniques have typically been examined in the laboratory with studies involving college students, or used in the courtroom during criminal cases. The research on the linguistic analyses with big liars has not been examined to our knowledge. Big liars could potentially defy detection by many verbal assessments. For example, if a big liar were to rehearse or tell numerous lies, the liar would provide lengthy details and thus appear truthful. Furthermore, Mazip and colleagues suggested that individual differences, such as acting ability, must be considered when using reality monitoring. T.R. Levine opined that some liars may be transparent or bad liars, but conversely, some may be extraordinarily good liars. While not all big liars are necessarily good liars, some may be. A good liar or a big liar may be able to produce content that is seemingly based on actual experiences. Additionally, good liars tend to rely heavily on verbal strategies when deceiving. The deceptive brain. In 2013, President Obama announced an initiative called the Brain Research Through Advancing Innovative Neurotechnologies (BRAIN) Initiative. The goal was to spur interest and funding in brain research and neuroscience technologies. As with many initiatives that have a noble cause, Some of these initiatives were looking for gain, and some of the brain-based developments were half-baked. For example, in one case that occurred in 2008, a 24-year-old woman, Aditi Sharma, received a life sentence in prison for killing her ex-fiancé based on the results of a brain electrical oscillation signature, BOS, test. The BOS test was developed as an alternative method to the use of polygraph-based lie detection test and test based on recognition measured by event-related potential of P300. Electroencephalography is used to measure brain waves, and the P300 wave refers to a positive wave response that has an onset or peaks around 300 to 500 milliseconds. Thus, researchers present brief stimuli, not longer than 200 milliseconds, so that the person is not yet aware of them, and use electroencephalography to look for a P300 response, or a brain blip. The person who is connected to the electrodes does not need to respond verbally because the wave will be emitted before they can produce a word. Presumably, a person being interrogated and emitting a P300 wave to an accurate statement would reveal that they know about the incident or crime. For Sharma, even though she indicated that she was innocent, her brain emitted the P300 waves to statements about the murder. However, one major concern regarding the BOS was raised: the scientific merit. 6 months after Sharma was sentenced, the same research lab indicated that 2 other people were responsible for the murder of her ex-fiancé. Obviously, BOS and the P300 wave were not valid and reliable tools for detecting dishonesty. The clear concern of putting the cart before the horse with lie detection tools is the potentially grave outcomes for people who are erroneously identified as liars. One of the biggest concerns raised by the scientific community about BOS was that the developer, Mukundan, refused to allow researchers to review the BOS protocol independently. Though some slapdash products and claims may be presented as scientific, most neuroscientists are genuinely seeking to explore and understand the neurological underpinnings and mechanisms of human behavior. Some of these scientists have made a case for using brain technologies for deception detection, though their reliable application may yet be years away. In defense of using the P300 wave, Yacono argued that the P300 wave, coupled with the CIT, is promising, and ongoing research has continued for more than 20 years. Reported accuracy rates of the P300 using the guilty knowledge test within laboratory studies are 88% truth and 82% lie. Yacono stated, "The P300 GKT will not be applicable in all crimes, but there is good reason to believe it will be applicable in many crimes." Sattel and Lilienfeld indicated that the biggest concern is whether brain scan technologies can be used to infer deception within real-world settings. Other approaches to merging neuroscience technologies and deception detection have included neuroimaging techniques. One such technique is functional magnetic resonance imaging, fMRI, which measures blood flow in the brain produced by neuronal activity and has been used to infer the presence of deception. In some studies, participants are asked to lie or tell a truth as part of a modified CIT. Studies have indicated that 2 areas of the brain are more engaged when lying than when telling the truth: the inferior lateral prefrontal cortex and the medial superior prefrontal cortex. The accuracy of fMRI studies in detecting lying has ranged from 65% to 100%, with the study that yielded 100% accuracy conducted by Ganis and colleagues. However, studies of deception detection using fMRI carry some limitations. It is expensive, and a small number of studies are conducted on single subjects. As a result, meta-analysis has not been used to analyze the approach collectively. There is a tension between the deception detection ability of assisted, mechanical, and neuroscience technologies and the accuracy, specificity, applications, and consequences of these approaches. The appeal of the polygraph, along with other physiological measures, may be rooted in its lie detection mystique, and the appeal of neuroscience. The National Research Council, NRC, suggested that the polygraph arouses strong emotions and fosters an overarching cultural belief that it is infallible. There is something attention-grabbing and convincing about the visual imagery of sensors, wires, bands, and electrodes connecting humans to machines. Humans tend to associate this imagery with being scientific and credible. Perhaps people place more credence in tools that appear technologically advanced. For example, in a series of studies, McCabe and Castell presented participants with written summaries of studies in cognitive neuroscience with or without accompanying brain scan images. Participants who viewed the brain scans along with the summaries judged the study to be more scientifically reasoned than those who simply read the summaries. The researchers suggested that brain imagery may be more persuasive because it offers a tangible physical explanation for cognitive processes. Just as there is no Pinocchio's nose, there is no lie spot, no consistent and specific area of the brain that always lights up when a person is lying. Sattel and Lilienfeld stated, "No brain region uniquely changes activity when a person lies. Each type of lie requires its own set of neural process." Moreover, whether these technologies can accurately detect big liars or pathological liars has yet to be examined. That said, there is no reason to abandon the pursuit. Science works by addressing the problems and seeking to refine the methods to increase accuracy in prediction. New approaches. The accuracy rates of human detection, error within mechanical methods, and the potential consequences of incorrectly labeling an innocent person as a liar paint a grim picture for deception detection. So, are there any chances for humans to become more skilled at detecting deception? Is there any hope for us to catch big liars? We briefly consider some recent work that indicates that upwards of 90% accuracy is achievable. In 2 studies, deception experts, 5 federal agents and 1 person who had training in federal, state, and local law enforcement, reported a method with which they were able to achieve up to 100% accuracy in detecting deception. The researchers used a paradigm that provided an opportunity for participants to cheat within a trivia game and possibly to receive a monetary incentive. Then, using a structured interview that lasted 4 minutes, an interviewer asked participants a series of demographic questions and then asked about the trivia questions and if they had cheated. The interviewer asked a bait question, then told each participant that their partner would be interviewed and asked what the partner would say. The interviewer took a break and then returned and told the person that they had cheated. The final part of the interview consisted of a confession or denial. In the last phase of the study, participants watched videos of the interviews and made judgments about the videos. In the first study, the experts' judgments were correct in all 33 interviews. In the second study, the experts showed an accuracy of 97.8%. While these results are impressive, they have been criticized by others as invalid or unreliable. One concern was that the methods did not mimic lying and lie detection as they occur in the real world. Science works by criticism and skepticism, improving and building on what has been previously tested. Beyond the studies published by T.R. Levine and colleagues, T.R. Levine offered a look at other studies that have achieved high levels of accuracy. These studies all used some combination of interrogation, strategic use of evidence, and the solicitation of confessions. Typically, by getting a suspect to talk, an interrogator can elicit a statement that appears to conflict with evidence that the interrogator is strategically withholding. Once the suspect elicits the conflicting statement, the interrogator can unveil the evidence, point out the discrepancy, and solicit a confession. The approach, made famous by the television detective Columbo, appears to be very effective in identifying liars in laboratory studies. Could we also use Columbo's approach to discern if we are being lied to by a big liar? So far, no flawless method exists to detect deception. While research has improved accuracy rates by testing various methods of human detection and assisted or mechanical methods, we still find that these means fall short of perfection. Sattel and Lilienfeld discussed the implications of sacrificing personal liberties for less than perfect methods of detecting deception, e.g., wrongful convictions. Given that any error in lie detection might falsely implicate the innocent, is the 90% barrier good enough? Once again, the nuance of accuracy and the premium we place on detecting lies may be based on the relative consequences. Are we willing to use a 90% threshold for criminal cases? Would 99% suffice? Ethical questions arise regarding the percentage of people we are willing to allow for error and the circumstances. Certainly, government entities, Secret Service members, people in law enforcement, and people in forensics have specific interests in detecting big liars, often divergent from the everyday, relational, or personal interests that we carry. Detecting big liars. We have reviewed some of the various ways that people may detect deception. While some of these methods may be intriguing and may produce higher accuracy than others, we are left wondering how we should go about detecting big liars within our lives. Most people do not have fMRIs in their living rooms, polygraph machines in their basements, or training in how to elicit diagnostic cues. Also, how weird would it be, relationally, if we subjected people we were interested in romantically or otherwise to a series of polygraph assessments or linguistic analyses? The humor from Meet the Parents lies in the rare and socially awkward depiction of a father using a polygraph to test his future son-in-law's integrity. Can you imagine telling your romantic interest, "I really am interested in you and want to pursue a relationship, but first I need you to submit to a series of lie detector tests and an interrogation"? It is unlikely that many people would be interested in a long-term relationship with you. Some people are willing to undergo the polygraph for various relational issues on daytime television shows, but most of us do not act as interrogators in our close personal relationships or in most professional relationships. The truth is that we do not use many academic, laboratory, or Secret Service interrogation techniques to discern truth from fiction in our everyday life. Some of the pioneering research on how people actually detect deception within everyday life was conducted by Park and her colleagues. They recruited 202 undergraduate students and asked them to recall a recent situation where they discovered that someone had lied to them. They found that the most common way that people discovered that they were being lied to was from others. Participants also indicated using a combination of methods, physical evidence, and confessions to detect deception. Few people reported using in-the-moment verbal and nonverbal behaviors. Additionally, the researchers found that most people reported detecting lies afterward, as opposed to the moment that the person was lying to them. Let's consider some examples of real-life big liars and discoveries. We share some statements from people who discovered that they were being lied to by big liars, identified as compulsive liars or pathological liars, and how they discovered the lies. In line with the findings from Park et al., the lies were usually discovered over time, as evidence accumulated. One person who discovered the big lies she was told by her boyfriend wrote anonymously in a blog, but it was only along the way that his web of lies unraveled, and I slowly started discovering that a lot of the things he told me weren't true. I started to connect the dots and finally realized what happened to me. I had a relationship with a compulsive liar. Sometimes people may think that they are being lied to and seek out evidence. For example, one woman wrote in an anonymous online blog that she initially watched pornography with her fiancé, but after having intimacy issues, they agreed to stop viewing it. Subsequently, she had some suspicions that he was continuing to watch pornography, and so she investigated. She stated, "Usually I have a gut instinct when I know he's lying, and it has made me snoop into his phones and laptop, drugs and porn mainly. I was never like this, and I hate doing this." Similar to the findings from Park et al., another anonymous woman blogged that she discovered that her husband was having an affair and began to piece together other details and events in their relationship. Sometimes we may not know immediately that someone is a big liar. We may not find out until we gather information, learn about the person, and find inconsistencies in the evidence and the messages that we are being told. Another person wrote in an anonymous online forum that his girlfriend was a big liar. I had a secret crush on a girl from the gym for almost a year. Finally, I decided to friend request her on social media. When she accepted, I messaged her and explained who I was. I asked various questions, and she gave short answers. I joked about texting her, and she told me her phone was a POS and doesn't send or receive texts. We've been together 10 months, and she's never had any issues sending or receiving texts. She claimed she uses Snapchat, so I asked for her username. She read my message and didn't respond. She eventually stated she had been with 15 guys, and I had become the 16th. She was quick to add that she was either dating or interested in every guy she's had sex with. She asked how many local girls I'd been with. She claimed to have been with 2 local guys, her ex, and lo and behold, a drunken one-night stand. The first time she ever sent me a selfie, she was clearly not wearing a shirt. When I commented on this, she acted embarrassed and claimed she was in bed and she sleeps naked. We've been together 10 months and she's never slept naked. She avoids me at the gym and sometimes goes so far as to hide from me. She claims it's because she doesn't want people to think she's a groupie. She speaks very openly about the 3 guys she had longer relationships with. She will even mention very in-depth sexual details. However, she never mentions any other guys and gets very defensive if I ask. She claimed she's never sent a nude picture before. However, after dating for about a month, she sent one without my asking that caught her face and chest in the pic and her butt in the mirror behind her, complete with the caption, "I'm horrible." I don't interrogate her at all. I am very understanding. She volunteers info. Other times, people have no need to actively discover whether they are being lied to because the liar may simply confess. Park et al. Found that some people discovered deception by unsolicited confessions, meaning that people told them that they had lied. Sometimes we discover we have been lied to because the person lying decides to confess for any number of reasons, including guilt and regret. Some of our research on pathological liars has indicated that some pathological liars may self-identify as liars and seek help with their dishonesty. In some newer research, we are examining blog posts of pathological liars, compulsive liars, and big liars. We find that in those blogs, they will openly confess to lying. For example, one woman who lied to her doctor about the effects of medication had subsequently confessed to her physician. She stated, "I realized I'm a compulsive liar, and I went and told my doctor with the hope that my courage would be rewarded, that my lie would be wiped clean off the record, and I could go back to the pill I was on. But no, I can never go down that road again." Another woman reported that her lying was discovered in part because she was caught, and in part because she admitted guilt. She stated, "So it has been a long time knowing I am lying to the people around me for a few years, and even my boyfriend of a year now. He caught me out several times, and I kept making excuses, or perhaps admitted I was lying." Conclusion. For as long as people have lied, others have tried to detect lies. Trying to detect liars is of interest because we think that if we recognize them, we can then shield ourselves from danger, or at least mitigate the damage. While a robust body of scientific literature has moved us closer to detecting deception accurately, there is no surefire method to detect deception, and we can never be certain that we have accurately detected the big liars. On the other hand, there are things that we can do, or that most of us already do, that increase the likelihood of catching big liars. Because most of us do not have MRIs and polygraphs hooked up to our loved ones around the clock, most lies are detected through confession, evidence, and time. Thus, while we may sometimes actively seek evidence or check in on discrepancies as we learn more about a person, Other times we may passively discover lies when the liar confesses. An unsolicited confession requires little on our part. No need for electrodes, brain scans, or even prompting diagnostic cues. The other helpful strategy we can employ to detect big liars is to realize our own preconceived ideas and biases about lying behaviors. Knowing that eye gaze aversion and other nonverbal behavioral cues are weak indicators of deception, we can learn to dismiss our judgments based on these cues. Maybe, like the television detective, we can elicit information and discrepancies related to the evidence we have, which may result in a confession. The primary reason we attempt to detect when others are lying is so that we can avoid being duped. In Chapter 10, we turn our attention to various strategies that can be used to avoid falling prey to big liars. We also consider techniques for encouraging big liars to be more honest with us. Chapter 10. How to avoid being duped and to cultivate honesty. Honesty is something you can't wear out. Waylon Jennings. In Chapter 9, we surveyed many techniques that people have used to successfully and unsuccessfully detect lying. As it turns out, detecting lying in real time is a challenge. Most of us must accept that we are not walking polygraph machines. We cannot simply use our powers of observation to pick the big liars out of a crowd, but we can position ourselves to be less vulnerable to big liars. We can cultivate interpersonal strategies that increase the probability that people will be honest with us, and we can use techniques to identify when people are being dishonest with us more readily. In this chapter, we consider ways to avoid being duped by big liars. Nobody wants to be duped. Being played for a sucker feels awful. When we place our trust in someone and they take advantage of us by lying, we feel a strong sense of injustice. People who have been duped have the sense that they have been disadvantaged in some way by the liar. They often feel that they should have seen it coming. They stew in self-recrimination. People who have been duped often feel foolish and inept, angry and ashamed for being so trusting. Being duped feels so unpleasant that most people tend to work hard to avoid it. However, in some instances, people turn a blind eye to possible dishonesty. The ostrich within. Sometimes we fail to detect deception because we want to avoid the truth. It might seem easier to stick our heads in the ground than to deal with reality. Lies sometimes remain unnoticed because people are truth avoidant. Shying away from the truth has been referred to as the ostrich effect. Ignorance of the truth may be preferred when a lie sounds more pleasant, when the truth seems terrifying, or when knowledge of the truth might call on one to take difficult actions. A woman named Angela explained why it was better to hide from the truth, writing in an online forum, "The truth can be painful and emotionally intense to absorb. To swallow certain truths have been an absolutely awful experience for me, like entering a corner of hell. This is why I tended to bask in denial, only so I wouldn't end up losing my mind and falling into an extreme depression." Many of us probably hold beliefs or illusions that are preferable to the bitter truth. People often prefer to hear pleasantries and good things from others, even when those kind words are not entirely accurate. We gladly accept white lies because they stroke our egos, ease our anxieties, or allow us to have hope. Smooth-talking liars can dupe us simply by saying things that we want to hear. If we enjoy what they say more than we enjoy harsh truths, we may turn a blind eye to the lies. "You can't handle the truth," a famous quote from the movie A Few Good Men, presents another reason why we may prefer untruths over the truth. Sometimes we may be fearful of discovering the truth because we are unprepared to deal with the consequences. Knowing the truth may necessitate ending a relationship, having an uncomfortable confrontation, calling the police, being involved in criminal investigations, and even acknowledging that we have been a dupe. tacitly accepting lies can help people avoid conflict. If someone yet again says that they can't meet up for dinner because of a work commitment or because they feel ill, we may choose to believe that statement. If we press for the truth, we risk learning that the avoidant dinner guest simply doesn't like or respect us very much. Perhaps people shouldn't open boxes if they fear what might be inside. Research on intimate relationships shows that people often prefer white lies over conflict. Big liars can get away with their deceit quite easily when people stick their heads in the ground to avoid the truth. An obvious approach to reducing the likelihood of being duped is simply to be truth-seeking rather than truth-avoidant. Gullibility. In January 2000, a frightening chain of emails began to circulate. The emails, supposedly sent from researchers, claimed that a flesh-eating bacterium that had wiped out the monkey population in Costa Rica was now a danger to people. The bacterium had mutated in such a way that it was now growing on bananas. People who consumed these bananas were likely to contract a disease that would consume their flesh at a rate of 1 inch per hour, causing their skin to peel away from their bones. Amputations or death were the likely outcomes. The U.S. government knew about the imminent threat and anticipated tens of thousands of people would be infected, but was concealing the information to prevent a nationwide panic. The emails urged people to warn anyone who would listen. The emails were a hoax, but so many people fell for it that the U.S. Centers for Disease Control, CDC, put out a statement decrying the emails as a hoax. That was not enough. The number of concerned citizens continued to grow, so the CDC created a hotline that people could call to ask about their banana-related concerns. For years, suckers continued to believe the banana hoax. People are gullible. Big liars, scammers, and con artists count on it. They are successful because an endless supply of people will blindly accept their lies as the truth. People are still willing to wire thousands of dollars to Nigerian princes who promise to reward their marks handsomely for their loyalty. But why are people so gullible? Gullibility is the tendency to accept claims as true even when the evidence indicates that claims should not be believed. Two broad psychological features seem to leave some people more prone to believe lies than others: persuadability and insensitivity to cues of untrustworthiness. Easily persuadable people can be convinced to do things, often not in their interest, through social manipulations by others. The capacity to be persuaded is not in itself a bad thing. After all, in general, people like to be convinced to take the right action, to date the right person, or to make the wisest investments. However, some people are so easily persuaded that their malleability becomes a liability. Very persuadable people can't resist the charms of a slick salesperson. They find themselves convinced to buy products they cannot afford, or can be convinced to reveal extremely personal information about themselves. Persuadable people are unable to resist the pressure and manipulation of others. They are pushovers. The other feature of gullible people is that they are insensitive to signs that other people are untrustworthy. Any time we note that someone seems sleazy, creepy, or shifty, we are identifying them as a potentially untrustworthy person. We notice subtle clues, such as an odd demeanor, an overly intrusive style, or a backstory that doesn't add up. In other cases, we detect a set of incentives that might motivate someone to take advantage of us. These subtle hints let us know that we should beware. Some people, though, seem oblivious to these ominous signs. Some victims of catfishing scams report stories that would make most people a bit suspicious. For example, one woman reported in an anonymous online forum that she continued an online relationship with a man who supposedly couldn't talk on the phone because he was born without vocal cords. Another man in the online forum stated that he believed that the singer Katy Perry was trying to strike up a romantic relationship with him. Another guy believed he was dating Miss Teen USA. It's not that these circumstances are impossible, It's just that the average person would be suspicious and would gather more evidence. The most gullible people are both easily persuadable and insensitive to signs of untrustworthiness. When big liars deceive them, they accept the lies unquestioningly, whereas a less gullible person would not. Gullible people are not more trusting than the rest of us. In fact, the opposite seems to be true. Trusting people are less gullible than the average person. Trust is simply believing that another person will do what is expected. Trusting people are willing to count on others, but importantly, they also readily detect when people are untrustworthy. Gullible people seem to be deficient in social intelligence, the capacity to understand and act wisely in human social interactions. It involves understanding others' motivations, seeing others' perspectives, and reading others' emotions. Noticing and avoiding big liars seems to hinge on social intelligence. How to avoid being duped. Other than avoiding other people entirely, there is no foolproof way to avoid being duped. Even very intelligent and vigilant people are tricked by big liars. The best we can do is try to minimize the chances of being deceived. To understand how to avoid being fooled by lies, it is instructive to explore how people come to believe something is truthful. People use 5 criteria to determine the truthfulness of a statement. First, upon hearing a claim, people evaluate whether it is consistent with what they already believe. Imagine that you take your car in for an oil change, but your mechanic tells you that you need new tires. Do you believe they are telling the truth, or are they lying about the tires to make a quick buck? You are more likely to believe them if you noticed that your car has been sliding on the road when it is rainy, you sometimes skid to a stop at intersections, it has been a few years since you last bought tires, and you have had 2 flat tires this year. Needing new tires is consistent with each of those pieces of information. On the other hand, if you had purchased new tires only last year and your car was handling just fine, you might rightly be suspicious of your mechanic's claim. Information that fits with what you already believe is considered more likely to be true. If you want to avoid being duped by big liars, try to consider how their claims align or fail to align with what you already know to be true. The source of a claim is also important in determining whether we believe it is true or not. We believe the claims of doctors more than those of used car salespeople. Some individuals are simply more trusted than others. You can probably think of people in your life who only speak honestly, and you can likely think of others who are loose with the truth. We believe the reliably honest people. Consider the source. Big liars usually don't have reputations for honesty. We also tend to accept information as true if we can see that other people believe that information. If someone tells you that the CIA has secretly conspired with doctors to implant tracking devices in every American, you would likely be unconvinced. One reason is that it is difficult to find others who believe such a claim. People's beliefs don't depend solely on popular opinion, but when we don't have compelling evidence to evaluate whether a claim is truthful or fraudulent, we often rely on the wisdom of the crowd. If other people think someone might be lying, you should consider that too. Proof is also important. One of the easiest ways to avoid being duped is to verify the claims that are being made. Blatant lies often conflict with facts. For example, in 2022, George Santos was elected to the U.S. House of Representatives. Santos claimed to have graduated from college with 2 degrees. He said that he had worked for some prestigious Wall Street banks. He claimed to be Jewish. He said that he had lost his mother in the September 11th terrorist attacks. All these claims, and many more, were lies. A simple check of the facts, e.g. school records, employment verification, revealed his dishonesty. Checking the facts leaves big liars with less room to hide. Some people set the tracking features on their cell phones so that their spouses can always see where they are. If a person says they are going to the store, their claims can be believed because there is demonstrable proof of the destination. When we lack evidence of a claim, we are less certain of its truthfulness. In high-stakes situations, such as banking transactions and car purchases, people demand proof of claims to avoid being fleeced by big liars. Look for proof, and you'll be less likely to be duped. Finally, we believe stories when they are coherent. When all pieces of a claim fit together nicely into a cohesive narrative, we find them believable. When elements of a claim seem out of place, confusing, or disjointed, we tend to remain unconvinced. In many scams, a time comes when the scammer asks their mark to do something peculiar. For instance, in a telephone scam, a person posing as a police officer may tell their mark that they can avoid being arrested for an unpaid fine by buying a gift card and providing the gift card number over the phone. This odd detail, that a fine should be paid with a gift card, is the clue that causes many marks to see through the lies. The smoother and more typical a claim is, the more likely we are to believe it. 2 points are important here. First, the smoothness of a story is not proof that someone is honest. Try to pay attention to the specific claims that are being made instead of the polished way they are being said. Some smooth talkers can weave lies effortlessly. Second, if a story doesn't add up, the speaker may be lying. Lies usually come crumbling down when we start probing and asking more questions about the parts that don't add up. If part of a story sounds just a little off, start scrutinizing the claim. Lies often start to fall apart as soon as we start to scratch at the surface. The automaticity of belief. We are bombarded with information all day long, and we have limited attentional capacity, so we have to pick and choose the information that we carefully scrutinize or that we passively accept. People process new information in one of 2 ways. The central route of processing information involves thoughtful and careful consideration of the merits and evidence of the information being presented. If you are carefully deciding which of 2 televisions to purchase, you may pore over the list of features, carefully consider your needs, listen to the opinions of a store clerk, and then finally make a full assessment as you determine which television to buy. Other times, we have less ability to devote to such dutiful consideration. In those cases, we process information through the peripheral route, making snap judgments. These judgments are based on details unrelated to the logical quality or merits of the information. Instead, we assess information based on mental shortcuts, such as the likability or attractiveness of the messenger, the ease with which we understand the message, and the degree to which the message feels right in our gut. Big liars use our automatic processing against us. They bank on the fact that we can't carefully assess every statement. They succeed when we process information through the peripheral route, passively accepting whatever we hear. To avoid being duped, you need to use the central route, even though it is effortful. Such focus and careful consideration is a resource that we can use only sparingly. You need to know when to be vigilant about a possible lie and when to ignore that concern. How important is the truth in a given situation? If it is critical, then you should dedicate your mental resources to parsing statements, examining evidence, and carefully deciding if what you are hearing is true. Essentially, you need to allocate your cognitive bullshit detector resources appropriately. Central route processing is undermined by distractions, fatigue, divided attention, and time pressure. Big liars can derail your central route thinking by hurling information at you quickly, hiding false information among a flurry of truthful information. Buried under an onslaught of information, people often feel overwhelmed or exhausted. To avoid being duped, slow down and carefully consider the information that is being presented. Gullible people tend to make decisions about the information they receive hastily and without much thought. If you slow down and carefully consider what is being said, you can be resistant to being duped by big liars. Ask yourself how much actual information you have that the claim is true. You may realize that you have absolutely no personal knowledge of whether a statement is accurate or not. In those cases, it may be wise to dig a little deeper. When the truth is critical, drop everything else that is occupying your attention and focus. Skepticism. Adopting a more skeptical stance is another way to avoid being duped. Skepticism is simply questioning the validity of a claim when we have not yet seen evidence of its accuracy. When we are skeptical, we remain open-minded and consider multiple hypotheses. We may think to ourselves, this person may be telling me the truth, but it is also possible that they are lying. In Chapter 7, we discussed the truth default bias. As a default setting, most people assume communication is honest. Rather than passively accepting information, try to cultivate a stance in which you remain open-minded about the veracity of a claim until the evidence shows you that the claim is true or not true. If we remain skeptical about what people are saying, we may start to notice inconsistencies and other cues that they are lying. If we are not skeptical, we are apt to believe whatever lies they tell us. Being skeptical is a delicate balancing act. Trust is required for almost all social exchanges, although a certain amount of wariness can help us avoid being duped. Still, too much skepticism can be costly. If we are too untrusting, we risk socially isolating ourselves, missing opportunities, and harming our relationships with others. For example, in one study, researchers compared suspicious and skeptical customers purchasing a new car to their more trusting counterparts. The people who were most vigilant about being taken advantage of by the car dealers got the worst deals, on average paying more, about $1,800 more for a new $30,000 car. It may be that the overly skeptical customers soured their relationships with the dealers, removing any sense of duty the dealers may have felt toward the customers. We all harbor a certain degree of vigilance. Being vigilant is adaptive. It reduces the likelihood that we will be exploited. Our caution with others can help us spot people who intend to take advantage of us before they manipulate us. But if taken too far, it can cost us. Out of your element. Acknowledging our limitations is another way to avoid being duped. As psychologists, both of us, the authors, have a fair amount of knowledge and expertise in that sphere. However, neither of us has expertise in the world of finance, and thus we are more susceptible to being duped in that domain. If someone were to present us with a new investment opportunity that involved financing a cryptocurrency venture, our naivete would leave us extremely vulnerable to being duped. Gullible people fail to see their ignorance as a risk factor, whereas vigilant people are wary of limitations in their expertise. In domains in which you are naive, it is foolish to rely on yourself to determine what is true and what is not. Relying on trusted third parties who have no motivation to deceive is advisable. If someone is pitching a great investment opportunity, consult with a friend who has expertise in that field. If a car salesperson tells you that all car sales are required to include expensive add-ons, verify that claim on a consumer advocacy website. Respecting the limits of your expertise can help you avoid being duped. Keep a cool head. Emotions serve to drive our behavior, but they can cause us to be impulsive, irrational, and gullible. When cool reason is absent and our passions are in control, we are more vulnerable to being duped. The desire and excitement felt toward a seductive suitor can lead to ill-advised decisions. Intense greed and longing can drive people to abandon their normal caution and restraint. Fear can send a person bounding into rash actions. Even compassion and concern for others can cause someone to do foolish things, if not for the balance of reason. Situations that heighten emotions can disengage the powers of reason and leave a person vulnerable to deceit. One tactic to minimize gullibility is merely to recognize when your emotions are getting the best of you. Big liars can manipulate people by turning their emotions against them. For instance, con artists often use greed, fear, lust, and compassion to trick their targets. Their dupes get so emotionally engaged that they fall for the scam without noticing the signs of the deception. If you can step back temporarily from emotionally intense situations, you may more clearly see the red flags that someone is trying to dupe you. A cooler examination of the person who is riling you up may allow you to see what they are trying to conceal. A sound tool that can help us to be more resistant to duping is to know ourselves. If we have a sense of our weaknesses and vulnerabilities, and if we can notice what triggers our emotions, we stand a better chance of noticing when big liars are trying to manipulate us. Misaligned motives. Throughout this book, when addressing why people lie, we have discussed motives and incentives. People don't lie randomly. They lie when they have an incentive or a reason to lie. One of the most effective ways to avoid being duped is to know when people are apt to lie to you. The best way to understand when people might try to deceive you is to recognize when their incentives and motivations differ from yours. In a negotiation over a car purchase, the buyer and the seller have a common motivation. They both want the sale to proceed. However, they may also have misaligned incentives or motivations. The buyer wants the sale price to be as low as possible to save money, whereas the seller wants the price to be as high as possible to earn commission. In situations such as these, knowledge of motives can help you know when to be wary of deception. A vigilant person can avoid being duped by noticing when individuals' motivations or incentives are misaligned. We should calibrate our vigilance to the specific situation. Under conditions in which another person is highly motivated to lie and is easily able to dupe us, we should be skeptical. If you take your car in for a very minor and inexpensive repair, such as replacing a light bulb, and the mechanic boasts that they use only the highest quality parts in their work, there is not much point in doubting their claim. After all, the mechanic has no strong incentive to lie. The difference in price between a cheap light bulb and an expensive one is just a couple of dollars. Why would they lie? Even if they were lying, the falsity of their statement would have no serious financial effect on you. On the other hand, if you brought your car in for a major engine and transmission overhaul that will cost thousands of dollars, a shady mechanic has much more of an incentive to lie. Likewise, you should be highly vigilant about claims that cannot be easily verified. Lying is much more likely to occur when there is a large asymmetry in information between two people than when there is no such asymmetry. If your employer tells you that you are being paid as much as your coworkers who have the same job, it would be reasonable to be skeptical if the records regarding salaries are a closely guarded secret at the company. On the other hand, if the information could be verified easily in publicly available records, the employer's claim would be more likely to be true. Knowing how to be less gullible and actually being less gullible are not the same thing. Being astute and discerning is a skill that must be practiced if you want to avoid being duped. To be ready to rebuff big liars, you must adopt a consistent stance in which you maintain a healthy level of wariness. Big liars can be quite convincing, even to people who would seem to be the most able to spot them. Just ask Dr. Stephen Greenspan. Just as he was wrapping up writing his new book titled Annals of Gullibility, Why We Get Duped and How to Avoid It, Dr. Greenspan lost several $100,000 in a financial scam. Probing for the truth. If you stay vigilant and pay attention to that skeptical voice inside your head, you may have some doubts about what people say. An effective way of avoiding being duped by big liars is to pay attention to those hunches and follow up on them. Researchers who study police interrogations and interviews have some advice on how to probe for the truth. One strategy is to get the potential liar to talk. The more a person talks, the more information they provide. Each bit of information they offer is something that can potentially be checked out or verified against the evidence. If someone claims to have a successful business and you are skeptical, get curious and engaged. Ask a bunch of questions. Get them talking. If someone is lying and they reveal enough information, they will likely say something that can be proven true or false. Another technique is to have people repeat themselves. If a person at work claims to have contributed to a major project, wait a week and have them retell their version of events. Big liars often change the details between two tellings. If you notice the inconsistencies, you can reveal the dishonesty. Another effective technique is the strategic use of evidence. If you suspect a person is lying about something, play your cards close. Don't let them know what information you have. Imagine that you hosted a party and that after the party was over, you noticed an expensive ring missing from your study. You then sent a message to all the guests about the missing ring, but all denied having seen it. Someone is probably lying. What if during the party you noticed one guest emerging from your study and don't recall seeing any others in there? How would you question that guest about the ring? If they had taken the ring and you immediately let them know that you saw them coming out of your study, they would likely concoct a story about why they were in there. Perhaps they would offer, "Oh, I was looking for the restroom and got lost. Sorry." To use evidence strategically, don't disclose that you spotted the guest in the study. Instead, ask the guest if they had seen anyone in the study or if they had been in the study themselves. If the guest is the thief, they will likely want to distance themselves from any implicating information, so they will likely deny having been in the study. On the other hand, if the guest is not the thief, they would likely acknowledge having been in the study. If the guest lies about having been in the study, you can then reveal that you had seen them there, and they will realize that they were caught in a lie. The strategic use of information is a very effective technique for uncovering big liars and avoiding being the dupe. Getting others to be honest with you. Whether in our romantic relationships, in our friendships, or at work, life would be so much easier if we could count on others' honesty. It would be great if we could just ask everyone to be honest with us and they would comply. But sadly, people are not so compliant. However, we can nurture truthfulness in the people around us in small ways. Psychologist Bella DiPaolo is one of the leading researchers to have studied deception. During her decades of research on lying, she has examined the conditions that cause people to struggle with honesty. One of her findings is that people can create social dynamics in their lives that lead other people to lie to them. That is, our own behavior, to a certain degree, invites or encourages people to lie to us. So what do we do to set the stage for lying, and how can we change it? First, DiPaolo found that people will lie to us if we hold them in high regard. When we place someone on a pedestal and let them know how completely amazing we think they are, they experience a surprising amount of pressure to live up to those accolades. When we let people know that we think they are the best, they feel pressured to be the best. Imagine if you told your spouse every day that they are the smartest person on earth. You tell them that they can accomplish anything. What happens on the day that they lose their job because of poor performance, despite their best efforts? They certainly don't want to let you down and fall from your graces, so they might lie and tell you they were laid off because of a bad market. Lying may seem like the only way not to let you down. What should we do to create a relationship more conducive to honesty? Well, for starters, we can set reasonable expectations and acknowledge that all people, no matter how brilliant and capable, fall short sometimes, and that's okay. Having reasonable opinions of others helps maintain honesty. DiPaolo also found that some people set too high of a moral standard. We all have expectations of good behavior to some extent. We expect our neighbors not to steal from us. We expect our coworkers not to take credit for our work. Sure, we expect people to be on good behavior, but it is also possible to set that standard too high. After all people fall short of perfection. Many people probably can describe a parent, grandparent, or teacher who seem to have the highest moral standards. If we have to admit our moral shortcomings to that person, our first inclination might be to conceal the truth, minimize our behavior, or even lie. Having high standards is often a good thing, but setting unreasonably high standards for the behavior of others is an invitation to have people shade the truth from you. It might be surprising to learn that the people most likely to lie to you are the people who really, really like you. When people have a great deal of fondness and admiration for someone, they often hope that the other person will feel similarly toward them. People who like you may want to impress you so much that they use exaggeration and other forms of dishonesty to make that happen. DiPaolo also found that people may lie to you if you have power over them. If you can control someone's destiny, they may worry that an ugly truth will lead you to fire them, kick them out of the home, take away their car, or otherwise cause unpleasant things to happen to them. That fear may cause them to lie. It is common for bullying bosses to find themselves surrounded by people who feel that it is more important to be agreeable than honest. If you have power, and especially if you wield that power aggressively, people will struggle to be honest with you. It is not just the powerful who tempt dishonesty in others. If you are a scary person, people may lie to you. If you tend to exhibit explosive rage, people may do anything they can to avoid your wrath, including lying. Lying is extremely common in abusive relationships. If bad news might cause an hour-long flare-up that could turn physically violent, it is much easier to maintain the peace with a little fib. If you are the type of person who is prone to toss insults, threats, or slaps, you are likely not going to get the truth from people. DiPaolo also noted that if people seem emotionally fragile, others might not feel comfortable being honest with them. If it seems like a painful truth might cause you to collapse into a sobbing mess, people might decide to sidestep the catastrophic truth and feed you a little lie that will keep your spirits up. Others invite dishonesty by showing people that certain truths should preferably be kept under wraps. Some people live in homes that are full of elephants in the room. The parents don't dare mention that the daughter obviously has a drug problem. The husband never asks why his wife is coming home later every night and having whispered conversations on the phone in the other room. Some people make it pretty obvious that they would rather not deal with the truth. As a consequence, people speak in codes. "Shelley isn't feeling well again today," or "Susan must be working late again." If we make it clear that we don't want to deal honestly with reality, how can we expect others to bring up the truth themselves? We are not suggesting that anyone deserves to be lied to. Each of us deserves the truth. However, there are many things we can do to make it easier for people to be honest with us. Because people often lie when telling the truth becomes problematic, we are much more likely to have honest conversations if we can make honesty less problematic for people. By offering people acceptance, understanding, and stability, we make it easier for them to tell the truth. Essentially, people will be honest with us if they can trust us. Final thoughts. Most people accept the occasional lie as a necessary part of life. Research suggests that in a typical week, 95% of people tell at least one lie. Some tell many more than that. In contrast, big liars use deception as a primary instrument for navigating their social worlds. In their close relationships and in their vocations, big liars twist the truth to suit their needs, often leaving a wake of turmoil, ruined lives, and disaster behind them. In this book, we have offered insights into the people who do most of the lying. We have highlighted the childhood development of lying, as well as the personality traits and environmental contexts that seem to fuel dishonesty. We have presented the underlying motivations that drive big liars, as well as the psychological processes associated with prolific lying. We have also shared many real-life examples of big liars whose flagrant dishonesty wrought havoc in the lives of people drawn into their orbits. We have synthesized much of the scientific evidence available today in scholarly scientific journals or dense academic books, and have woven it alongside real-life stories to provide a fascinating account of big liars and their overall negative impact on society. And finally, we have aimed to provide our listeners with hope by including tips to avoid being duped by big liars, as well as some advice on how to invite others to be more honest. We hope that this information helps listeners to recognize, understand, and deal effectively with the big liars they encounter in their own lives. This has been a Highbridge production, read by Justin Price. Copyright 2023 by the American Psychological Association. Recorded by arrangement with the American Psychological Association. Recording copyright 2024 by Highbridge, a division of Recorded Books.